Chapter 12:14. It doesn't make sense. Jian Guhong and the others may be able to help him a little, but what can I, a divine sea realm cultivator, do? Communicating with such an old guy who has lived for who knows how many years, it really doesn't matter if you have a few extra thoughts. In the future, I will never casually promise others anything. Lu Yi secretly remembered this in his heart. Yang Qing glanced at him up and down. 7th Order Divine Sea Realm, a little bit worse. If I give you 10 days, it won't be a problem for you to break through to the 8th Order, right? Lu Yi really wanted to say that there was a problem. But when he met Yang Qing's smiling eyes, he knew in his heart that this matter couldn't be avoided. Although Yang Qing had been in a trapped state, he was not ignorant of some things in the 9 states. Perhaps his understanding was not comprehensive enough, but he knew the general situation. Especially Lu Yi, as early as the first time they met, Yang Qing had paid attention to him. How could he not know Lu Yi's cultivation speed? Moreover, he could tell at a glance what state Lu Yi was in at the moment. Giving him 10 days was already a generous amount of time. "Senior, what do you want me to do?" Lu Yi asked worriedly. "Go to Puxing first. You will know later." Tang Qing was so fond of Jiaoche Department's Yang Tai. Returning to the main body of the tree, the east of the ocean is definitely a place that a divine sea realm cultivator can set foot in carefully. Yang Qing shook his head. Sure enough, not having an elder at home is like not having a treasure. There doesn't seem to be such a sect. Why, did he get the inheritance left behind by others? Lu Yi asked. The corner of Lu Yi's eyes twitched. Why are the cultivators of the 4 states all like this? Looking for something bad and instinctively wanting to snatch it? Strikesure was waiting for me, looking at his hands behind his back. On the small tree in Najing behind the Zhongshe line, he nodded with satisfaction. It's not wrong. Yang Tangqing suddenly thought of something. During the later 4 prefectures period, was there a sect called the Sword Instrument Sect? Lu Yi nodded. Yes. Yu Ying answered, planning to find an opportunity to put the artifact refining experience from Sword Tool Sect in the treasure vault. In this way, all the artifact masters in the 4 states would not exchange for it, which could also be considered as helping Sword Tool Sect. The artifact refining's artifact refining. What are we going to do? She asked. What are we going to do? To snatch the real reincarnation tree? Yang Qing didn't want to wait for her to sell everything, but after waiting for a while, she still didn't get anything. She reacted, that tree was left behind 10,000 years later? This was also the reason why 4th-year students knew that there were no spirit jades in the upper 7 and lower 8 realms. Yu Ying nodded. I received some of his legacy. However, in comparison, there wasn't much of a difference between the two. Yang Qing could not imagine why Lu Yi would suddenly tell her about this matter. However, the only thing I could do right now was to listen in silence. In fact, according to Yang Qing's perception, the small tree was more than 100 years old. It was small and low enough, but it was also grand and ancient enough. As if seeing through Yu Ying's doubts, Yu Ying explained, there are no treasures in the starry sky. They were born with the heaven and earth, and there are 7 of them. Each of them has unfathomable abilities. None of the treasures is called the reincarnation tree. Don't think too much about it. The tree behind you isn't the treasure. It's just a clone of the treasure. Basically, the realms in the starry sky don't have such a clone of the reincarnation tree. It's not only the 4 states that don't have it. The tree behind you was obtained from the reincarnation tree by the ancient ancestors of the 4 states. It was Lu Yi who said that the reincarnation tree didn't have a main body or a clone. That was to avoid reminding Yang Qing of her talent tree. Big 4 said matter-of-factly, it's useless to tell him. To go to the main body of the reincarnation tree, one needs to be accompanied by a sufficiently weak person. You can't accompany him there. Lu Yi was helpless. She could only fly to a spiritual peak in the distance and cultivate quietly. As for whether or not the existence of the talent tree would be exposed, it didn't matter. The talent tree was just a relatively powerful inheritance. It might be very attractive to cultivators with low cultivation, but it was probably useless to Yang Qing. What he said made sense. It was precisely because there was something that didn't exist that the cultivators of the 4 states paid attention to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the base of a small sect outside. The remaining 7 days were used to consolidate her cultivation. She dragged it out until the 10 days were up before returning to find Lu Yi. In such a top-level realm without any children, how could the strongest sects there be any weaker? Moreover, the talent tree's cultivation had always been hidden. Yu Ying might not be able to discover anything. When I condensed my clone, the talent tree would form a root. Now that the entire talent tree had split into 7, could it be counted as the talent tree having a clone? One Big Four replied, "Of course you know. Although the weaklings of the 4 states have all died, there was still a lot of information left behind." How come I've heard him mention this before? If Lu Yi had done it in front of me, Yang Qing probably would have known about the secrets of the reincarnation tree's clone. As for the Sword Dao, I can only rely on Thought Moon Immortal. Back in the Sword Instrument sect, you were the one who inherited the Sword Dao inheritance. Snatching the reincarnation tree, that brat really dared to think about it. Can this thing be snatched? Moreover, a mere divine ocean realm cultivator dared to talk so casually. It really made me laugh. My sword gourd doesn't have much experience in refining weapons. It wasn't brought out from the sword instrument sect's secret realm. Back then, I only knew that the sword instrument sect was an ancient sect. I didn't know which era it came from. Then, withered leaves fell from the sky. The small tree that was full of vitality also withered like an old man on the verge of death. Bad appearance counted. 2 dodging was fine. Extending your head was a knife. Retracting your head was also a knife. 3 perhaps in the future, when I go to the starry sky, I won't have the chance to confirm this because the starry sky is vast enough. In the later 4 states, there were many weak cultivators in the cultivation world of the 4 states. This was an era when the name of the 4 states shook the starry sky. The 4 states were so weak that even after 10,000 years, there were still no records of them among the small races and small ancient realms in the starry sky. 10,000 years have passed. The glorious sects of the past are long gone. However, in the Human Emperor sect, there isn't a single ordinary thing left behind. As Lu Yi spoke, he turned around and looked at the small tree behind him. 3 as he spoke, he raised his hand and pressed it under the small tree. He knew what kind of power he was using. The small tree suddenly shook slightly. Then, the green leaves on the tree stopped turning from green to yellow. It seemed that in an instant, the reincarnation tree's clone had passed through a very young age. Now, it seems that the sword instrument sect is very small. It might also be a remnant of the later 4 states. Yang Qing clicked his tongue in wonder. He looked up and down at the small tree, but he couldn't see anything ordinary. Logically speaking, since it was left behind 10,000 years later, the small tree must be extremely ancient. Moreover, after 10,000 years, the cultivators of the 4 states should have discovered that it was normal for the small tree. Back then, the human emperor of the Human Emperor sect saw my dragon in the starry sky and wanted to snatch me away. In the end, the 2 of them became acquainted with each other. Yang Qing said, "What does the junior need your help with? You can't say it now, right? The feeling of not having anything to do is very bad. Since I've received the favor of the legacy, I have no obligation to help him spread the legacy," Lu Yi admonished. In this way, there was no similarity between the talent tree and the reincarnation tree. In the 4 states, even if my clone was far away, he wouldn't be able to sense anything. However, there was absolutely no limit to the distance he could sense. Yang Qing was still able to determine what the limit was for the time being. Yang Qing had broken through to the first-order Divine Sea realm during the expedition to the blood-refining world. Before that, he had refined a small amount of saint blood. Every drop of saint blood contained a very small amount of energy. The process of refining saint blood was actually equivalent to the accumulation of one's foundation. It was just that the efficiency was not as fast as cultivating in the 4 states. The falling leaves didn't fall to the ground. Instead, they turned into a thick yellow halo that gathered and surged. Therefore, no matter how much he cultivated before returning to the 4 states, his cultivation was already close to the 4th-order Divine Sea realm. Someone said with a bad temper, "He's going to snatch something, but he's going to snatch the reincarnation tree." Lu Yi looked at me meaningfully. "Don't worry. What you want him to do must be something he can do. If he can do it, you will only force him to do it." After spending 10 days, a total of 7 days, I still hadn't made a breakthrough. Yu Ying's eyes flashed with reminiscence. "Second, that place is the strongest sect in the 4 states after 10,000 years. It's the foundation of the sect." After a pause, I asked, "Why did you choose to cultivate outside?" The reincarnation tree's clone, no matter how far it was, could open a passage to the mainland at the end of the previous reincarnation, but my clone hadn't reached that level. Yang Qing looked surprised and sent a message to Big Four. "Do you know about the reincarnation tree?" Yang Qing suddenly understood. She only felt that she had opened up a small world. What kind of reincarnation tree was that? If Lu Yi mentioned it, I was afraid it would be a long time before I learned about it. Lu Ye's voice came. "There is no magical connection between the reincarnation tree's clone and the main body. That connection doesn't weaken even if they are separated by hundreds of millions of miles. That's why the reincarnation tree's clone in the 4 states doesn't have an ordinary ability. When it withers and retreats to the previous reincarnation, it can open a passage to the reincarnation tree's main body." Human Emperor Sect, remember that name. That is the name of the strongest sect in the 4 states. The real reincarnation tree reincarnates once every 10,000 years. From existence to non-existence, from large to small, it evolves the true essence of the universe. That's why he saw that it wasn't ordinary. That's because the truth is that it isn't 100 years old. Before 100 years, it will wither and grow again. But it didn't last long. I refined almost half of the sacred blood in the entire blood refining realm. The majority of it was refined because of my clone, so I didn't give it up. Chapter 12:15. The thick yellow halo gathered and twisted, quickly condensing into a ball. Yang Qing reached out to grab Lu Yi and brought him to the ball of light. At the same time, he warned him, "When you get there, don't reveal that you are from 9 regions. If you need to report your origin, just say that you are from 9 heaven world." 9 regions had been hidden in the starry sky for tens of thousands of years and had long disappeared from the eyes of the major races and top realms. At this stage, the name of 9 regions was not suitable to be mentioned. If the races and realms that had joined forces to deal with 9 regions knew, they would definitely search the entire starry sky. At that time, there might not be no risk of exposure. The thick yellow halo dissipated. On the nameless peak, a withered old tree appeared in front of the wooden house. Yang Qing and Lu Ye's figures had already disappeared. Little Nine, who looked like a little white rabbit, rolled his eyes and instantly turned into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Mouth, it was not easy to finally get rid of the claws of the dragon race. Although he knew that the other party would come back, Little Nine had already made up his mind that next time, he would not be caught so easily. Somewhere in the distant starry sky, in a strange small space, Yang Qing's figure suddenly appeared. Even with his cultivation, he could not figure out the mechanism of this teleportation across millions of miles. This was no longer something that could be done by human strength. This was a unique connection between the reincarnation tree's main body and its clones. Just like him. This was also the innate ability of the reincarnation tree. But in the next moment, his face sank. Because Lu Yi, who should have appeared beside him, had disappeared. In a strange and multicolored small space like a condensed starry sky, Yang Qing said in a deep voice, "Old Shu, what is the meaning of this?" Dragon's might filled the air. It was completely different from the dragon's might that filled the air when Lu Yi was on the dragon throne. The dragon's might of a real dragon was incomparably strong and violent, almost condensing into a substance. Under such terrifying might, the condensed starry sky began to distort and tremble. There was no problem with the teleportation. If there was a problem, he would not have appeared here. But Lu Yi had disappeared. There was only one explanation. During the teleportation process, the reincarnation tree had done something that he could not detect. This had nothing to do with cultivation. This was the reincarnation tree's home ground. If the other party wanted to do something, no one would be able to detect it. Yang Qing was a little angry. No matter what the reason was, it was too outrageous for the people he had brought to disappear without even giving him a heads up. And strictly speaking, this was the first time he had brought someone here through the reincarnation tree's clone. In the past, in the 9 regions, it was the people of the human emperor sect who dealt with this matter. Therefore, he didn't know what taboo he had committed or what other reason he had for losing Lu Yi. But no matter what, he needed an explanation. An ethereal and aged voice suddenly rang out in this small space. Dragon Monarch, don't worry. This old man just wants that little friend to help me with a little something. Yang Qing frowned as she vaguely recalled something. The tree world? He asked, slightly surprised. The reincarnation tree replied, that's right. There's something wrong with the tree world. Yang Qing sneered, I told you before not to have the idea of educating without discrimination. Stupid. You should have killed all those races with ulterior motives long ago, or expelled them all. Although this was the first time he had brought someone here through the reincarnation tree's clone, he had also come here when he was roaming the starry sky and had some interactions with the reincarnation tree. Therefore, he knew a lot about the reincarnation tree. The reincarnation tree chuckled, I gained something. I gained something. The heavenly Tao is fair and just. I have an almost endless lifespan. With great power, there will naturally be certain restrictions. So I have to be fair and just. What a joke. Yang Qing snorted, how can there be complete fairness and just? If that's the case, you would have been refined by others. You could have lived freely for so many years. You wouldn't have taken advantage of this time to ask for help. Since you have asked for help, this bowl of water won't hold up. Even. The reincarnation tree was still not angry. Dragon Monarch is right. I've been very distressed recently. An old tree that had lived for tens of thousands of years actually said that it was distressed. This was funny no matter how one listened to it. Yang Qing couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense and asked, why did you choose him? Don't tell me you know that he came from the 9 provinces. In this starry sky, perhaps all the races that had participated in targeting the 9 provinces were not sure about the survival of the 9 provinces, but the reincarnation tree definitely knew, and even clearly knew the location of the 9 provinces. This was because there were his clones in the 9 provinces. Through his clones, he could clearly sense the existence of the 9 provinces. Similarly, the reincarnation tree also knew clearly that there were cultivators from the 9 provinces who came here through his clones. Of course, that's not the only reason. It's just that there have been more problems in the tree world recently, so I invited a lot of helpers this time. He's just one of them. Yang Qing understood. Since that was the case, there was no problem. Back then, when the cultivators of the human emperor sect brought their juniors here, they often encountered such things because the tree world of the reincarnation tree often had problems. This was related to the reincarnation tree's philosophy of life. Since there was help, there must be good ones. For the 2 little fellows in the divine ocean realm who were not bad, this was also a good opportunity. However, Dragon Monarch, among all the juniors who came here this time, the little fellow you brought has the lowest cultivation level. Has the 9 provinces fallen to this extent? Yang Qing curled her lips and said, I think you're an old man. When did cultivators kill people based on their cultivation level, especially those from the 9 provinces? The reincarnation tree chuckled, then I'll wait and see. With that, he stepped out and directly appeared in a relatively wide corridor. Behind him was a door with a number on it. Yang Qing silently memorized it. Later on, he still had to pass through here to return to the 9 provinces. He couldn't remember wrongly. If he really did, he didn't know which realm he would run to. He appeared suddenly and almost bumped into a few figures passing by here. One of them hurriedly dodged. Then, he glared angrily at Yang Qing. Yang Qing turned to look at him with a bad temper. What are you looking at? If you look again, I'll wring your head off. The reincarnation tree had taken Lu Yi away without giving him a heads up. It more or less affected him. The dragon race's narrow-mindedness wasn't groundless. Those who could come here were all from large realms. Those who weren't from large realms didn't have the right to come here. Moreover, regardless of whether they were glorious or not, Their ancestors must have been glorious before. Because if they weren't glorious enough, it was impossible to ask for a clone from the reincarnation tree. How good could the temper of creatures from such realms be? The person who was stared at by Yang Qing was about to fly into a rage, but was quickly stopped by his companions. Although they didn't recognize Yang Qing's real body, it was really not good to cause trouble in this place. The leader said, "We're in a hurry. If we offend you, please don't be angry." The other party looked educated and reasonable, so Yang Qing couldn't say much. She just waved her hand coldly and turned to leave. After taking a few steps, she suddenly turned to look at the guy who was glaring at her just now. The corners of her mouth curled up and she sneered, "What did you say? Say it again if you have the guts." It just so happened that she had nowhere to vent her anger. That person's expression was indignant, and he was making a lot of noise. He didn't know which race's language it was. He thought Yang Qing couldn't understand it, but Yang Qing had roamed the starry sky for many years. What race had she not seen? What language could she not understand? The leader's expression changed, and he secretly cursed his companion for being nosy. He could only mediate, "Fellow Taoist, please don't take offense. My companion was just complaining, not cursing." "F***CKU? Yang Qing cursed. "Do you really think I can't hear you?" The person who scolded him just now didn't hide anything and shouted, "So what if he scolded you?" The reason why she was so fearless was because there were rules in the reincarnation tree. All guests who came here were not allowed to fight, or they would be disqualified from coming here again. Just this one rule alone was a rule that no one dared to violate. To a certain extent, whether or not one could enter the reincarnation tree was the standard to judge whether or not a realm was truly a large one. Take the current 9 regions for example. Although it could also give birth to the constellation realm. However, without the legacy of the previous 9 regions and the clone of the talent tree, even if it had reached the level of a large realm in terms of size, it would not be recognized by the fellow Taoists in the starry sky. However, in the starry sky, there were still many such realms. Not every realm that could give birth to the constellation realm was qualified to come here. Then you're out of luck. Yang Qing smiled sinisterly and walked forward step by step. The few of them were shocked, and the leader shouted, "Fellow Taoist, what are you trying to do? Beat you guys up." As soon as Yang Qing finished speaking, she pounced on them. The strength of these people was definitely not low. However, how could they withstand the old fist of a dragon? In addition, they had scruples in their hearts and did not dare to be presumptuous here. In a short moment, they were beaten black and blue, and they were in an incomparably sorry state. What shocked them even more was that such a thing happened in the reincarnation tree. As the host, the reincarnation tree did not have the slightest intention of stopping such a nasty incident. Under normal circumstances, once a battle broke out, the reincarnation tree could completely stop it or teleport the 2 sides of the battle into the starry sky. However, from the beginning to the end, they did not wait for the reincarnation tree to uphold justice. The information revealed by this matter was very shocking. Because of the person in front of them, it was very likely that he was an expert that the reincarnation tree did not want to easily offend. "Let's start the robbery now." After venting for a while, Yang Qing looked down at the few people who had been beaten to the ground. He did not kill them, and the reincarnation tree tacitly agreed to his venting here. He also had to give the reincarnation tree some face. If he really killed someone, he would have to give it some face. If he really killed them, the reincarnation tree would definitely not ignore it. This was related to the integrity that the reincarnation tree had established for countless tens of thousands of years. 3. Robbery? The few of them were all dumbfounded. Such a powerhouse. He actually wanted to rob them? Was there any justice left? Chapter 12:16. When the thick yellow color dissipated, Lu Yi suddenly found that he had arrived at a place with clear spiritual energy, birdsong, and fragrance of flowers. This is definitely not the 9 prefectures. The spiritual energy of the 9 prefectures is not so dense, so... I've arrived? This is teleportation. The whole process is almost unforgettable, unlike the time when he went to the Wushuang continent through the Liyuan Great Array. What entered his eyes was beautiful purple and red among the greenery, and the tip of his nose was surrounded by all kinds of calm but fragrant flowers. There seems to be another very special fragrance? One just when Lu Yi was about to carefully look around, he suddenly felt that something was wrong, dodged to the side, raised his hand to hold the hilt of the Panshan saber, and looked at the place where he was just now. There was another figure in that position, but it was not Yang Qing who brought him here, but an extremely graceful and enchanting figure. The fragrance that lingered at the tip of his nose, in addition to the unique fragrance of all kinds of flowers here, was the fragrance of this woman's body. When Lu Yishirbao left, the first thing that entered his eyes was a white, dazzling light that made him a little dizzy. The woman was undoubtedly very beautiful, and had an indescribable graceful and charming temperament. Lu Yi had seen all kinds of beauties in the 9 prefectures, but in terms of charm, no one could compare to this woman. One coupled with her enchanting figure, which was the typical type of thin branches with fruits hanging on them, it could give a very strong visual impact, and any male creature who saw it could not help but take a few more glances. Lu Yi was now puzzled about one thing. Where did Yang Qing go? Who is this woman? Compared to Lu Ye's bewilderment, the woman's expression was much calmer, and she only pondered for a moment, and then realized what had happened. This was the benefit of having a reliable elder by her side. Before coming here, her elder had already told her about the current situation, so she could take it as it came. In contrast, Yang Qing was very unreliable, but this matter could not be blamed on him. He had been sealed for 10,000 years, and this was the first time he brought a junior with him as an elder, so he did not think of giving too many warnings, and the dragon race was not a meticulous character. This caused Lu Yi to be at a loss. When Lu Yi noticed the woman, she obviously noticed him as well. She tilted her head and glanced at him. When she saw Lu Ye's attire, she immediately felt a headache coming on. Soldier Mang. In the starry sky, each of the major sects had their own nicknames: Meat Barbarian, Magic Fool, Sword Lunatic, Soldier Brute, Ghost Shadow. All of these are closely related to one's fighting style. It wasn't that they looked down on each other, but there would always be some conflicts between their ideals. Among them, the faction that the magic cultivators were most willing to cooperate with was the body cultivators, because the body cultivators were tough enough and could charge at the front to attract the enemy's firepower, giving them ample time and energy to activate all kinds of powerful spells. The ones who were most unwilling to cooperate were Sword Lunatic and Soldier Mang Zi. Strictly speaking, these 2 types of people were the same type of people. When they killed, they didn't care about anything and had no intention of cooperating. Even if Lu Yi was a ghost cultivator, this woman would not have such an expression. However, when she saw Lu Ye's attire, she knew that the other party was a weapon cultivator. As soon as the words came out of her mouth, she hurriedly raised her hand to cover her red lips and pursed her lips into a smile. "I misspoke, fellow Taoist. Please don't blame me." Lu Yi just stared at her. He didn't understand what was going on at the moment, but one thing was certain: this woman who suddenly appeared in front of him didn't seem to have any hostility. This made his actions just now seem to be making a fuss about nothing. The woman curtsied. "Jiao Xian Yu Yao Rao, greetings, fellow Taoist." Was she reporting her origin? Jiao Xian should be the name of the realm this woman came from. As for the specific location in the starry sky, there was no way to know. Others were polite, so Lu Yi naturally couldn't be bad. Moreover, at such a close distance, she should be the one on guard. Yu Yaorao could see Lu Ye's origin as a weapon cultivator, so how could he not see Yu Yaorao's path as a magic cultivator? She raised her hand and cupped her fist. Jiao Tian, Lu Yi. Jiao Xian and Jiao Tian sounded similar, but Jiao Tian was fake while Jiao Xian was real. Yu Yaorao pondered for a moment and found that she had never heard of the name Jiao Tian. However, the starry sky was vast, and it was normal for a spirit sea realm cultivator like her to not know much. Since she could come here, it meant that this was a large realm, so she didn't pay too much attention to it. Junior brother Lu seems to be a little confused about his situation. Ben Yirao was undoubtedly someone who knew how to get familiar with people. Just now, she even called out to junior martial brother. Because just now, when Lu Yi was filming U2B, the fluctuations were very clear. His cultivation level was 1 level lower than hers. This inevitably surprised Yu Yaorao because as far as she knew, those who were qualified to be brought here by their elders were all at the 9th stage of the Divine Sea realm. I am only a short distance away from taking that final step. There seemed to be no precedent for an 8th order Divine Sea realm cultivator to come here. After all, which large realm didn't have 9th order Divine Sea realm cultivators? It didn't make sense for a 9th order Divine Sea realm cultivator to come here instead. I was just about to ask this senior sister. I came here with my family's elder, but after arriving here, my family's elder was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I saw senior sister. What's going on? Where is this place? Since others were willing to get close to him, Lu Yi naturally let nature take its course. Your elder didn't say anything to you? Lu Yi replied, he only said that he would bring me to the reincarnation tree, but when I look around, there doesn't seem to be any reincarnation tree here. It was a place filled with birds, fragrant flowers, and lush greenery. It had a kind of aloofness, but other than that, there was nothing else worth paying special attention to. Yu Yaorao laughed. Your elder is really unreliable. She straightened her face and said, this is indeed the reincarnation tree. Strictly speaking, it is a tree realm. The so-called tree realm is the cycle of reincarnation. It can be said that there are an infinite number of them. As for which tree realm this is, I am not sure. As for why we are here. As for why. She paused for a moment as if she was sorting out her words, before continuing, the reincarnation tree is a treasure of the starry sky. It has existed for tens of thousands of years. It accepts all rivers and streams, and it teaches without discrimination. Therefore, in this vast starry sky, there are many races who have lost their territories or have to wander around for various reasons. They come to the reincarnation tree to seek shelter. The reincarnation tree has never refused them. After all, it has many tree realms, enough to accommodate those who have lost their homes and wandered around. Of course, there are also many who come here because of its reputation. Therefore, the reincarnation tree can be seen as a miniature version of the starry sky. Almost all the races in the starry sky can be found in the reincarnation tree, including us humans. We also occupy many tree realms here. Races can't coexist peacefully most of the time, which leads to some conflicts. However, everyone is making a living here, so they can control themselves, unless one situation occurs. What situation? Lu Yi asked in a timely manner. Not all the races who come to the reincarnation tree to seek shelter only come with the idea of seeking shelter. There are also some who have ulterior motives. They came here with the intention of plundering those rare races, because some of the rare races in the starry sky often have some very special abilities. Most of the disputes and conflicts between the reincarnation tree realms are caused by this. Lu Yi was surprised. If so, the reincarnation tree will drive them away. Won't it be over if they are driven out? It should be able to distract the reincarnation tree, right? Yu Yaorao pursed her lips and smiled. She was really charming and graceful. I don't know how a woman in her 20s can have such charm. Of course, the reincarnation tree has such an ability, but it is the sect that established the world. Its purpose is to tolerate all things. When those races come, it will accept them, but will not expel them. It will also not take the initiative to do something for them. What will it do? Lu Yi said thoughtfully, not taking the initiative, so it can be passive? Yu Yaorao looked at him in surprise. Junior brother's mind is sharp. That is indeed the case. Take this realm for example. At this moment, it must have encountered some invasions, so no matter which race lives in this realm, they can send a request to the reincarnation tree, asking it to send people to help them. This is the reason why we are here. It is the reincarnation tree that sent us here, and what we want to do is to solve the problem of the reincarnation tree. Junior brother can treat this as a test. If you can pass, then you will have the qualifications to participate in the next battle of the Divine Sea. If you can't pass, then you will have the qualifications to participate in the next battle of the Divine Sea. If you don't pass, you may have to go back to where you came from. Lu Yi wanted to ask about the next battle of the Divine Sea, but after thinking about it, he decided to ask Yang Qing later. Asking here would make him seem ignorant. Until now, he still didn't know why Yang Qing brought him here. Yang Qing only said that they were here to rob something. As for what to rob, he didn't know at all. However, from the information he had obtained, it seemed that he and Yu Yaorao were natural allies. Because the experience in this realm would determine the qualifications of the two of them. In this way, there was no need to guard against her. Lu Yi turned his head and looked around. Then, in senior sister's opinion, what race lives in this realm? Yu Yaorao said, in any case, it will not be the human race. If it was the human race, there would be traces of human existence. Although they didn't know how big this realm was, within the range of their divine sense, they didn't sense any living creatures. As for what race it is, they will naturally come to us. As soon as Yu Yaorao's voice fell, the surrounding trees suddenly bloomed with a faint light. Then, spots of light drifted out from the trees and gathered in front of the two of them. In the shroud of light, an illusory figure appeared and bowed slightly. I have made the two distinguished guests wait for a long time. First, thank you for coming. Chapter 12:17. Lu Yi looked over and saw that the illusory figure was extremely tall, at least several meters tall. It had hands and feet, but whether it was the hands or feet, they seemed to be made of tree branches. There was also a circle of green saplings on its head, full of vitality. Its body was straight and there were clear facial features on its head. What kind of race was this? Lu Yi was confused. At first glance, it looked like the wood had turned into a spirit. Wood spirit race? Yu Yaorao recognized the other party's identity at a glance. Lu Yi didn't know any wood spirit race, but he had seen fire spirit race before. Back then, there was a group of fire spirit race sealed under a volcano between Blue Flame Mountain Pass and Lone Mountain City Pass. He accidentally broke the seal. And caused a lot of trouble at that time. As if realizing Lu Ye's ignorance, Yu Yaorao transmitted her voice to him. In the starry sky, there are 5 spirit races, corresponding to metal, wood, water, fire, and earth respectively. They are all extremely rare races. Since Wood Spirit has appeared in front of us, this should be Wood Spirit Tree World. Wood Spirit race has a gentle temperament and basically lives a peaceful life. However, each of them is a natural medical cultivator and is proficient in all kinds of healing methods. Moreover, they themselves have boundless strength. It is said that Wood Spirit Crystal Core has the effect of reviving the dead, so they are easily targeted by some powerful races. Lu Yi nodded silently. Such a race had strange abilities and treasures in their bodies, but it didn't seem strong enough. It was normal for them to be targeted. It was a matter of course. But what? Lu Yi asked. Yu Yaorao shook her head. It's nothing. It wasn't something difficult to talk about, but although she recognized the Wood Spirit Tree World that had suddenly appeared in front of her. It seemed to be a Wood Spirit, but it seemed to be somewhat different from the legendary Wood Spirit. She was only a divine sea realm cultivator, so her knowledge of the major races in the starry sky was limited to the records of the travel books of the elders in her sect. She had never personally come in contact with them. Yes. The Wood Spirit's voice was extremely loud, like a muffled thunder. This old man is Mu Shanshan, the patriarch of Wood Spirit race. Thank you 2 little friends for coming. Recently, our Wood Spirit race's tree world has encountered some trouble, so I am afraid we will have to trouble you 2 little friends to help us solve it. Yu Yaorao bowed respectfully. This is the original intention of us workers coming here. Patriarch, please tell us what you need us to do. Since the reincarnation tree had sent her and Lu Yi into this tree world, the qualification test had already begun. As for how to pass this test in the end, it all depended on what the 2 of them would do next and the reincarnation tree's judgment. Patriarch Mu Shanshan continued. The Wood Spirit Tree World has always been suffering from the invasion of the insect race. Those vile insects have invaded our Wood Spirit Tree World and created a huge insect nest in our Wood Spirit Tree World. In recent years, the living space of the Wood Spirit Tree World has been greatly suppressed, and the safety of the children has been greatly threatened. Therefore, this old man would like to ask the 2 of you to help us eradicate that insect nest and kill those vile insects. Lu Yi frowned as he listened. Why were there insectoids everywhere? From the looks of it, the insectoid race was a huge disaster in the starry sky. However, when he recalled Yu Yaorao's introduction about the reincarnation tree's all-encompassing nature, he felt relieved. The reincarnation tree was equivalent to a miniature version of the starry sky, where many races gathered, many of which were extremely rare, but they all had special abilities. As the saying goes, an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. Under such circumstances, it was easy to be targeted. The insectoid race had always been the largest raiding group in the starry sky, so it wasn't strange for them to appear here. "We need some detailed information," Yu Yaorao said. She and Lu Yi were only the two of them. With the cooperation of the Wood Spirit clan, it was hard to say how much help the other party could provide, so information was necessary. Yu Yaorao was confident in her own strength, but she didn't have much confidence in Lu Ye's strength. He was only an 8th order divine sea cultivator, so no matter how strong he was, he couldn't be that strong. It was just a fact. "This is not a problem. This old man will give you two a detailed explanation later. My Wood Spirit clan will definitely thank you for your trouble." Yu Yaorao smiled faintly without commenting, but Lu Yi was interested. "What kind of reward?" Patriarch Mu Shan scratched his ears and cheeks. He had just said it casually. Most of the humans he had come into contact with before were noble and pure people. No matter what they thought, at least they wouldn't ask too much. After the matter was over, he would just give them some random things to send them off. Who knew that someone would really ask him such a question in person? This was the first time since the beginning of time. He rolled his eyes and said, "Crystal core. The most precious crystal core of my Wood Spirit clan. With it, no matter how serious your injuries are in the future, even if you only have one breath left, you can come back from the dead. With it, you too will have an extra life. The crystal core of the Wood Spirit clan is worthy of you two little friends." Lu Yi nodded lightly. If it was such a reward, it would indeed be very satisfying. Cultivators out there, who didn't have a dangerous time. If their lives were in danger, the crystal core of the Wood Spirit clan could really save their lives. Yu Yaorao was stunned for a moment, and then her bright eyes narrowed slightly. Patriarch Mu Shan still wanted to say something, but Yu Yaorao suddenly raised her hand and waved it. She didn't know what treasure she used, but the space in front of her instantly became more and more visible. There were many fine lines visible to the naked eye. Those fine lines crisscrossed and surrounded Patriarch Mu Shan tightly. Lu Yi raised his hand and held the hilt of the mountain pan saber. His aura condensed and didn't release. Patriarch Mu Shan's body stiffened. He stood in place and shivered. He looked at the countless flickering thin lines around him in horror and fear. "Well, what is this?" Lu Yi tilted his head and looked at Yu Yaorao. Yu Yaorao snorted lightly. "He is not a Wood Spirit. I was almost fooled by him." "What do you mean?" Lu Yi asked. "The Wood Spirit clan, no matter what, will never give their crystal core to others. Because the crystal core is the source of life of the Wood Spirit clan. Even if a Wood Spirit dies, as long as the crystal core exists, it can give birth to a new Wood Spirit. Therefore, the crystal core is a taboo for the Wood Spirit clan. The Wood Spirit clan values it even more. How can a real Wood Spirit clan give away their crystal core? That is equivalent to giving away their own clansmen. Also, there's one more thing. Although I told you that the Wood Spirit clan's crystal core has the effect of bringing the dead back to life, it was actually just an exaggeration. Perhaps it really does have some healing effects, but it definitely can't bring the dead back to life. He said he's the chief of the Wood Spirit clan, so how could he not know the difference? So he is a fake? Lu Yi clicked his tongue in wonder. He raised his eyes and looked at Mu Shan. His eyes were filled with insight spirit patterns, but there was no sign of it. Problem. Fortunately, Junior Brother asked one more question. Otherwise, I would have been fooled by him. When Lu Yi asked that question, Yu Yaorao felt that this cultivator from the 9th heaven was a little greedy. He hadn't helped anyone yet, but he was already thinking about it. The benefits were really realistic. But now, it seemed that she still had to thank him. "Speak, why did you lie to us?" Yu Yaorao stared at Mu Shan. She urged her spiritual power, and the sharp lines around his body shrank inwards. After a while, Mu Shanshan was still quibbling. He said with a sad face, I didn't lie to you. I am really the patriarch of the Wood Spirit clan. You have to believe me. While he was complaining about his grievances, he observed the two humans in front of him, but he saw that the two humans in front of him were completely indifferent. Especially that weapon cultivator. Not only was he indifferent, but he was also eager to try. His fingers were still rubbing the hilt of his saber, as if he could draw his saber and slash at any time. I swear to the reincarnation tree, I didn't lie to you. The weapon cultivator really pulled out his saber and walked towards him step by step. Mu Shanshan panicked. His eyes turned even more frequently than before, as if he was thinking about how to win the trust of the two humans in front of him. But in such a short time, the other party had a preconceived idea. How could they be so easily convinced? Junior brother, wait. At the critical moment, Yu Yaorao shouted. Lu Yi stopped. The corners of Yu Yaorao's mouth curled up into a smile. You dared to act so mysteriously in front of the reincarnation tree and made so many mistakes. Moreover, you even had such a miraculous transformation ability. The two of us couldn't see through your disguise at all. Moreover, your mouth was full of nonsense and you didn't dare to show your true appearance. I roughly know what race you are. Mu Shanshan was still stubborn. I am the patriarch of the Wood Spirit clan. But his tone was much weaker. A group of demons. Quickly show your true form. Yu Yaorao shouted. The thin lines surrounding Mu Shanshan suddenly shrank rapidly. Those thin lines looked unremarkable, but in fact, each one was incomparably sharp. She had refined them with treasures from an extremely evil place in the Nine Profound World. Its quality was so high that it had reached the limit of a spirit treasure. Even if she advanced to the constellation realm in the future, such a spirit treasure would be enough to meet her needs for battle. The thin lines crisscrossed, and Mu Shanshan cried out in pain. I am dead. As he shouted, green blood gushed out from his whole body. His whole body was divided into pieces and scattered on the ground. Li was shocked by Yu Yaorao. This was the reincarnation tree's tree world. Moreover, the two of them had come to help. But before they could help, they killed the main character? What was going on? Although he had pulled out his saber, it was at most for show. He wouldn't really use his saber to chop people. But Yu Yaorao didn't panic in the slightest after killing the wrong person. Instead, she was calm and composed. Junior brother Lu probably doesn't know that there is a very rare race in this world. It is much rarer than the five-element spirit clan. It is called the demon race. They are born with a very strange transformation ability. They can transform into any appearance they want. Moreover, it is as if they are made by nature. Even if the cultivation is 1 or 2 realms higher than them, they may not be able to see through it. New. Chapter 12:18. So the wood spirit is not a wood spirit, it is just an illusion. Lu Yi understood. If this was the innate ability of the wood spirit, then there was a reasonable explanation why even his clear vision spirit rune couldn't see through the flaw. Mouth the Starry Sky was vast and there were many races. Among them, except for the human race, which didn't have anything special, almost every other race had 1 or 2 skills. Mouth, but ironically, in this starry sky, it was the human race that didn't have anything special. They occupied the most domains and were the most famous race among all the races. They were the real overlord. There was once an almighty expert who asserted that if the human race in the starry sky didn't have internal strife, then there would be no space for other races to survive. At that time, all the races would become the vassals of the human race. But the internal strife of the human race was something that couldn't be stopped or changed. The fairy race has many strange characteristics, not only the ability to transform, but if there is any race in the reincarnation tree's tree world that can transform to such a lifelike degree, then it is the fairy race. While speaking, Yu Yaorao had already put away her thread-like spirit treasure. Standing in front of the corpse of Patriarch Mu Shanshan, a bright flame burned in her hand. Staring at the corpse on the ground, she said, "Still not showing yourself? Do I have to set you on fire?" When her thread-like spirit treasure cut Mu Shanshan's body, it looked like she had photoshopped Mu Shanshan's body, but in fact, she didn't feel any force at all during the whole process. In other words, when the thread-like spirit treasure cut through Mu Shanshan's body had already been torn apart, including the dark green blood that spurted out. It was just the appearance of a method. A scene that surprised Lu Yi appeared. After Yu Yaorao uttered her threat, the pieces of broken corpses on the ground actually came to life. They twisted and changed, and turned into a solid existence that was only about 1 foot tall. At first glance, they looked like the human race that had been shrunk many times, but different from the human race, each of them had a pair of wings on their back. The wings were not flesh wings, but translucent like the wings of a dragonfly. They were wearing colorful clothes, and each of them had different colors lingering around them. For a moment, it was as if 100 flowers were blooming. The field of vision became colorful. In terms of appearance, the men were extremely handsome, and the women were also extremely beautiful. All of them were young and full of vitality. Only the spirit transformed from the wooden head had a head full of white hair. He looked like an old man, but he was dressed in flashy clothes. Unlike the colorful clothes of the other spirits, this old man was shimmering with golden light. Even among all the other spirits, he was the most dazzling one. Thinking back to Wood Shanshan's initial introduction, Lu Yi suddenly understood that this guy wasn't Wood Shanshan, he was clearly Gold Shanshan. It was just that when he introduced himself, he almost made a blunder. This was a demon. Lu Yi looked around with great interest. In the 9 regions, one would never be able to see such wonderful things. Aside from the human race, there were only ugly and abominable insects. Later on, they also came into contact with the blood race and the corpse race. However, no matter which race it was, none of them could be compared to the fairy race. The monsters revealed their true forms, and there were more than 100 of them. They flapped their wings, and under the dumbstruck gaze of Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao, they stacked up one after another. It could be seen that they were very skilled in doing this, and they should have done it more than once. In the blink of an eye, they stacked up into a pyramid. The only one with a head full of white hair, Gold Shanshan, stood at the top of the pyramid, assuming a domineering posture of a golden rooster standing on one leg and fiercely looking at the 2 humans. Then the monsters began to speak. Since you saw through it, then we won't hide it. Yes. That's right, we are in the sky, gathering wisdom and beauty. Yes. Talent and morality. Yes. The greatest, the wisest, and the most powerful. Bao, fairy race. Yes. The monsters spoke in a very hierarchical manner. The first to speak was from the lower layer, and then from one layer after another, and finally from the top, Gold Shanshan, to finish. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Yu Yaorao also raised her hand to cover her face. Even if she had read some records about the monsters from the travel notes of her elders, and knew what kind of character the monsters had, at this moment, she still felt somewhat embarrassed. She quietly transmitted her voice to Lu Yi. No matter how old the fairy race is, they are born with a childlike nature. They are actually just like the children of the human race. Yes. Lu Yi deeply agreed. I see. Ah. Ayaya. Gold Shanshan suddenly exclaimed. There was no other reason. The pyramid, it collapsed. The group of monsters swayed left and right. They clearly had wings, but every one of them fell and became dizzy. Immediately after, the monsters began to argue. This monster accused another monster of not standing properly, and that monster accused another monster of falling down, and this was not an ordinary argument, but a quarrel between every monster. For a moment, the scene was very lively. Lu Yi felt like there were hundreds of ducks quacking in his ears. Before they could reach a conclusion about the collapse of the pyramid, the topic inexplicably changed again. The monsters began to argue about why they were exposed. Some said that Gold Shanshan was too stupid, some said that he should not have transformed into a wood spirit, and all kinds of quarreling topics, and so on. I forgot to tell Junior Brother, the monsters talk too much. Yu Yaorao transmitted her voice to Lu Yi again, but this does not mean that they are not united, this is just their characteristic. Yes. Lu Yi also saw this point, because although the monsters were quarreling, no one had the intention to fight, especially Gold Shanshan. He was obviously the patriarch of the fairy race, but he was being scolded by the other monsters. His face and neck were red, and he did not have the power and dignity that a patriarch should have. The monsters were still quarreling, and the two humans just stood on the side and watched quietly. At a certain moment, the noise suddenly subsided, and then the group of monsters looked at Yu Yao Rao and Lu Yi anxiously. Gold Shanshan pushed the crowd aside, flapped his little wings, and pretended to cough lightly and said, "First of all, I would like to apologize to the two distinguished guests on behalf of the fairy race, because we deceived you. For upright and kind people like us, this is an unforgivable mistake, but we also ask for the two distinguished guests' understanding. After all, our fairy race is really not suitable to appear in front of others." "Yes." Yu Yao Rao smiled slightly. "I understand. The fairy race has a huge attraction to any race, and this is also the fairy race's way of self-protection." Gold Shanshan's forehead showed a mature posture. "It would be best if the two of you can understand. Of course, it doesn't matter if you don't understand. Let's just let this small unhappiness vanish, and let's talk about business." Yu Yao Rao said, "I still say the same thing. It's not a problem if you want our help. We came here for this purpose, but we need detailed information." Gold Shanshan said, "I will inform the two of you." Then, he narrated the current situation of the fairy tree world. In fact, the situation was not too complicated. It was just that the insect race had invaded and built a large insect nest in their fairy tree world, wanting to invade their fairy tree world and kidnap their fairy race members. What Yu Yao Rao and Lu Yi needed to do was to uproot the insect nest, kill all the insect race, and return the fairy tree world to Threshold Universe. Lu Yi found a problem. Are there only so many of your people? Or were they killed by the insect race? Gold Shanshan said proudly, "There are only so many of our people, so we are the rarest race in the starry sky." As if this was something worth showing off. Lu Yi raised her eyebrows. "In other words, we are the only ones dealing with the insect race?" Gold Shanshan said solemnly, "This little friend is wrong. It's not us, it's you." Lu Yi was stunned. "Then what about you? We will cheer for you." Gold Shanshan replied seriously, and the other fairy race members were stunned. Lu Yi suddenly felt that there was a reason why this race had so few members. Their own home was invaded, but they did not have the intention to resist, and instead counted on outsiders. This kind of philosophy was really hard to agree with. To be honest, if this was not the test of the reincarnation tree, Lu Yi would not help. People need to be strong to be saved, and if they can't even be strong, then they should be wiped out. There were more than one or two races that were wiped out. Yu Yao Rao said, "We can help, but you can't just cheer. We need your blessings." Lu Yi didn't know what Zhu Yan was, but Yu Yao Rao had some understanding of the Fey race. Since she brought it up at this time, then she must have her reasons. Presumably, this so-called Zhu Yan would be able to provide some assistance. The Gold Shanshan rubbed his hands, looking a little embarrassed. Yu Yao Rao looked determined. "If you can't even provide blessings, then please forgive us for not being able to help. We need to discuss." Gold Shanshan said quickly. "Then hurry up, time waits for no one." A group of fairy race members immediately gathered together, with their heads facing inwards and buttocks facing outwards, forming a large circle, and began to discuss. Lu Yi could not understand because they were speaking the fairy race's language, so he turned to look at Yu Yao Rao. Yu Yao Rao smiled bitterly. "I don't understand the fairy race's language either." "What is blessings?" Lu Yi asked. Yu Yao Rao explained, "The fairy race itself does not have strong fighting power, and they don't like to fight with the insect race. They were not used to fighting with people at noon, so in the face of the insect race's invasion, they actually did not have much ability to resist. Junior Marshall brother Lu should have wronged them on this point. It was not that they were not strong enough, but it was mainly because of their characteristics. Although they were not used to fighting with people, each of them had an innate auxiliary ability, which was their blessings. Any cultivator, if they could bring a fairy race member with them, their strength would increase by at least 20%. They could also give cultivators some special blessings in different fields. There is such a strange thing? Lu Ye's eyes lit up, and he looked at the fairy race members gathered in a circle in front of him, as if he had seen a group of treasures. Please enter them. Com to view the latest update. Read for free. Chapter 12:19. After the discussion of the fairies ended, Gold Sparkle stood up with a serious expression. We have decided to agree to your request. We will send 2 of our strongest fairies to help you. These words sounded. Something seemed wrong. It was clearly Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao who had come to help them fight against the enemy's invasion and restore the peace of the tree realm, but Gold Sparkle's words clearly had the intention of turning the host into a guest. However, there was no need to care about this with the fairies. They were born this way. Yu Yaorao nodded. That's for the best. I wonder which 2 fairies your noble family will send? Gold Sparkle chuckled. This. We still have to discuss it. Turning around, the fairies began to discuss again. Lu Yi couldn't tell who was stronger or weaker among the fairies. In his perception, there wasn't much difference between the auras of these fairies. It was as if even their cultivation realms were about the same. But thinking about it, there was a standard among them that could distinguish between the strong and the weak. Moreover, this matter concerned the future of the fairy tree realm, so they would definitely not be careless, since they had said that they would send the 2 strongest demons. Fairy, then naturally. But soon, Lu Yi knew that he was thinking too much. Because the fairies were very against this matter, the discussion turned into an argument. Seeing that the situation was about to get out of hand, Gold Sparkle jumped into the air, put his hands on his waist, and shouted, "In that case, let's do it according to the old rules. There is an old saying in the human race, life and death are fated, wealth and honor are in the heavens. It also applies to us fairies, so no one has any complaints later." The group of fairies all had solemn expressions as they prepared for battle. Just when Lu Yi thought that they were going to pass some sacred and fair test. When they were about to decide the title of the strongest in a fair way, Gold Sparkle waved his hand and a large circle suddenly appeared in his hand. He held the cylinder with both hands and shook it up and down a few times. Then he slapped it in front of him and shouted, "Who's first?" The fairies pushed and shoved each other, showing great humility. Everyone has a share. No one can run away. Gold Sparkle took out the demeanor of a patriarch and pointed at one of the yellow-clothed fairies. "Fairy, you first." Usually, any demon would dare to disobey the clan leader, Gold Sparkle, but when he gave orders, no one dared to disobey. The yellow-clothed demon immediately flew forward dejectedly. She reached out with her small hand and grabbed the cylinder. When she pulled her hand back, there was a long object in her hand. She didn't know what material it was made of, but it was pitch black. The yellow-clothed demoness immediately cheered and laughed loudly. With the first one, the rest was simple. The sprites stepped forward one by one, each of them grabbing a small black rod from the cylinder. Some were overjoyed, while others were uneasy. Lu Yi found that those who were cheering were obviously the ones who had caught the longer black stick. Those who were uneasy were all. It was relatively short. He finally understood that this was not a sacred and fair ceremony at all. This was simply a lucky draw. When all the fairies had drawn their little black rods, Glittery Gold shook the cylinder again. Almost all the little black rods in the fairies' hands flew back, leaving only 2 fairies holding them. The results are out. Twinkle Gold looked at the 2 sorrowful demons and came to a conclusion. It's you guys. Among the 2 fairies, one was wearing yellow, but it was not the yellow-clothed demon who had drawn the first lot, but the other one. The second one was wearing green. The yellow-clothed one was a male demon, and the green-clothed one was a female demon. It was unknown whether it was a coincidence or not. Glittery Gold brought the 2 fairies in front of Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao, and said with a straight face, "2 distinguished guests, these are the 2 most powerful clansmen of our fairy clan. They will definitely be able to provide you with the best blessings for the rest of your journey." Lu Yi didn't know what to say at all. If he hadn't seen their selection with his own eyes, he would have really believed this guy's nonsense. Yu Yaorao, on the other hand, looked as if she was used to it. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Patriarch. Please rest assured we will protect them well." Glittery Gold nodded, "Then I will leave the rest to you." He reached out and pushed the 2 chosen fairies forward, turned around, and left. A large group of fairies followed him noisily and soon disappeared without a trace. From afar, a golden, sparkling voice sounded, "Children, life must be enjoyable. Let's continue the banquet." It caused a burst of cheers. The two humans and the two fairies looked at each other. The two fairies were obviously very uneasy about what had happened, and there was a lot of fear in their eyes. Yu Yao Rao was well aware of it and comforted them gently. "You two can rest assured, we will never let anything happen to you." The two fairies nodded, and the fear on their faces dissipated a lot. Lu Yi said, "But you also have to be obedient. If you don't, you will die in vain." He was really convinced by the unreliability of this group of fairies. Starting from the fairies, there were all kinds of situations that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. This kind of unreliability was not a problem on normal days, but if it was revealed in a battle with the enemy, it may cause some unnecessary trouble. It had always been the instinct of the human clan to be good at being bad. Since Yu Yao Rao was playing the good cop, he could only play the bad cop. To be honest, if he wasn't curious about the fairies Zhu Yan, he didn't want to bring these two fellows along. But looking at Yu Yao Rao's expression, she seemed to be very satisfied with this. The two fairies, who had just calmed down, became frightened again. To them, it was the most vicious word in the world. "So, in the next operation, you have to assist us well. We will do our best to protect you." Yu Yao Rao continued. "But if there is someone who is disobedient and runs away from the battle, I will kill him first." Lu Yi added. Yu Yao Rao smiled knowingly and didn't say anything more. Instead, she asked, "Then, which direction do your Zhu Yan lean towards?" The yellow-clothed fairy, who was a male, spoke first, and he was still calm. "My Zhu Yan leans towards the enhancement of the body." The green-clothed female fairy said weakly, "My Zhu Yan leans towards the enhancement of weapons." Yu Yao Rao understood and raised her finger to point at the yellow-clothed fairy. "Then you follow me, and the other one will follow junior martial brother Lu Yi." She was a magic cultivator, and she wouldn't use a sword to kill people. It was useless to have the enhancement of the green-clothed fairy, so this arrangement was reasonable. The yellow-clothed fairy nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice, and the green-clothed fairy looked at her with tears in her eyes. "Can I?" "No." Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed her and put her down. She sat on his shoulder. The green-clothed fairy grabbed a strand of hair by his ear and shivered. She was trembling. Yu Yao Rao smiled and said, "Then let's start with introducing ourselves first. I know the Zhu Yan of you fairies. You need to use the name of the person you wish to bless. My name is Yu Yao Rao from the Nine Mysteries world. This is junior martial brother Lu Yi from the Nine Heavens world." The yellow-clothed fairy said, "My name is Huang Tong Tong." The green-clothed fairy still whispered, "My name is Lu Ying." What kind of bullshit name is this? Lu Yi was stunned, but seeing Yu Yao Rao's smiling expression, she seemed to have expected it. "Then we can be considered to know each other now." It has to be said that Yu Yao Rao was beautiful and good at mediating the relationship between each other. It would be very relaxing and pleasant to get along with such a person if they were not enemies. After a few words, the two fairies were not as nervous as before. "Before taking action, can you let us feel the power of your fairies Zhu Yan? This way, it will be more convenient for us to cooperate later." Yu Yao Rao said. This was also a reasonable suggestion. Even if she did not say it, Lu Yi would have said it. Since they want to cooperate with each other, they naturally have to get familiar with each other first. They can't just pick up the sword and go into battle. "No problem." Huang Tong Tong nodded and then flew and landed on Yu Yao Rao's shoulder. He muttered something in his mouth, and then a layer of bright yellow light flowed out. Then, it entered Yu Yao Rao's body. Yu Yao Rao raised her eyebrows and silently felt it. She sighed with emotion. The fairy's Zhu Yan is indeed worthy of its reputation. The enhancement of the physical body was not only to strengthen the physique. This was not very useful for magic cultivators, but under this kind of Zhu Yan, she could clearly feel that the spiritual power in her body was flowing faster, and her thoughts seemed to be a lot purer. Just this alone could indeed increase her strength by at least 10 to 20%. If it was an individual cultivator who received this kind of Zhu Yan, the increase would be even greater. What about you? Lu Yi saw that Yu Yaorao seemed to have gained something, so he turned his head and looked at Lu Yingying on his shoulder. Lu Yingying was shocked and almost fell from his shoulder. She felt that this human was much more ferocious than the other one. When he opened his mouth, it seemed like he wanted to eat people. She did not dare to be anxious and hurriedly activated the Zhu Yan technique. Lu Yi waited for a moment, but did not feel anything. But thinking of what Lu Yingying said before, it seemed that her Zhu Yan technique was biased towards the enhancement of weapons. He pulled out his sword. Lu Yingying instantly cried, "Don't kill me, don't kill me, I've already tried my best." "Shut up!" Lu Yi shouted in a low voice. Lu Yingying quickly stopped crying and looked at him pitifully. Lu Yi frowned. "It's useless?" The Pan Shan sword did not seem to have any change. Yu Yaorao was puzzled. It shouldn't be. Nothing. There was indeed no change. Lu Yi looked at Lu Yingying again. Did the Zhu Yan technique make a mistake? Nothing. There is absolutely no mistake. Lu Yingying waved her two small hands and the wings behind her back also fluttered together. Yu Yaorao also said, "A demon's Zhu Yan technique will not be wrong. If it is useless, then there is only one possibility." She looked at Lu Yi with deep meaning. "Junior brother, did you give a fake name?" "What do you mean?" Lu Yi was puzzled. Yu Yaorao explained, "A demon's Zhu Yan technique is a magical power. There was once a powerful cultivator who studied it, but it is a power that no other race can use except for the demon. It is related to some mysteries in the unseen world. Please enter .com to view it in your browser. Free reading. Chapter 12:20. The so-called mystery was something that couldn't be explained, observed, or even felt, but it really existed. The blessing words of the fairy race were related to this mysterious power. This was also the biggest reason why no other race could use the blessing words except for the fairy race. The name of a creature is actually a bit mysterious. This is also why many powerful beings in the starry sky don't easily reveal their names. The blessing words of the fairy race require the name of the person being blessed. If the name is fake, then the blessing words won't work. Lu Yi looked calm. "This is my name." With Yang Qing's previous warning, he wouldn't casually announce the existence of the 9 regions, but there was no need to hide his name. He was a divine sea realm cultivator. Why would he lie about his name? Yu Yaorao saw that he didn't seem to be faking it, so she couldn't help but be curious. Then why? I also want to ask why, Lu Yi thought. But soon Yu Yaorao remembered something. "Junior brother, in your domain, is there any other name that is more recognized by the creatures in your domain? If there is, then it should be because of this." The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. There really was such a name. Lu Ye. Yu Yaorao looked at Lu Yingying. Lu Yingying understood tacitly and used the blessing words again. This time, Lu Yi immediately felt something different. This was because there was a kind of energy that he almost didn't notice being added to his Pan Mountain Saber. From the outside, the Pan Mountain Saber didn't seem to have changed at all. However, he could clearly feel that the Pan Mountain Saber had become sharper. It was as if Lu Yingying had blessed him with the sharpness spiritual tattoo, and the degree of sharpness was much more powerful than a simple sharpness spiritual tattoo. With the saber in hand, he suddenly had an illusion that no matter what was in front of him, he could easily cut it in half. Spiritual tattoo? It wasn't a spiritual tattoo, but it felt similar. The sharpness spiritual tattoo was the first spiritual tattoo he obtained from the talent tree. It had provided him with a lot of help in his cultivation and battles. Almost every battle, he would bless the Pan Shan saber with the sharpness spiritual tattoo, sometimes even a double peak sharpness spiritual tattoo. Because the Pan Mountain saber's characteristics were never sharp enough, it was mainly heavy and heavy. This forced him to add sharpness spirit runes to make the saber sharper. When one's cultivation wasn't high, the sharpness spirit rune was still very powerful. It could basically slash through everything. However, as his cultivation level increased, the enemies he encountered became more and more powerful. Just the sharpness spirit tattoo alone was not enough. Even the double peak sharpness spirit tattoo was not enough. This was because the higher the cultivation level of the enemy, the stronger their physique. This was especially so when he fought against the holy seeds of the blood race in the blood refinement realm. If it were not for Lu Ye's ability to suppress the enemy to a large extent with the holy seeds of the blood race, it would have been very difficult for him to use the mountain pan blade alone to cause effective damage. Recently, Lu Ye had been thinking about this problem. Should he reforge the Pan Shan saber to make it sharper? But he couldn't make up his mind. However, if his sharpness spirit tattoo could reach the level of Zhu Yan of the fairy clan, then there would be no need to modify it at all. While many thoughts flashed through his mind, Yu Yaorao pursed her lips and giggled. It seems like junior brother Lu's other name is the one that is truly recognized. For Zhu Yan of the fairy clan, only a name that was truly recognized by more creatures could play a role. Right now, 9 out of 10 cultivators in the 9 prefectures would address him as Lu Ye. Only the people closest to him would address him as Lu Yi. Even the information in the battlefield imprint that was verified by Tianji had long changed his name to Lu. Lu Yi was a little puzzled. Ye was obviously just a playful nickname. It was fine if it was spread in the 9 regions, but now that he had come to the starry sky, there was no way to get rid of it. Let's go. Lu Yi didn't want to be entangled in this issue. He sheathed the saber and walked out. The location where the two were now was inside the fairy tree realm, which was also the center of the fairy tree realm. This location only had a radius of a few hundred miles, which was hidden by the fairy clan. Therefore, even if they only had hundreds of people, they could still stand under the encirclement and suppression of the insect race. Because although the insect race with pure intelligence occupied the vast majority of the fairy tree realm, they still couldn't find a place to stay. This point had already been explained in the introduction of Golden Glitter just now. This was also the reason why they didn't show any impatience. They had long been accustomed to such a situation. Even without Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao, their safety would not be threatened. Moreover, even if Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao helped them solve the problem this time, in a few days, there would be a new invasion of the insect race. In the next 100 years, when the next batch of Divine Sea Realm cultivators came, there would be people sent here to help them. Unless the reincarnation tree changed its principles, the fairy tree realm would never be peaceful, because the insect race could also rely on it and occupy a place in other fairy tree realms. Only a moment later, the two left the hiding place of the fairy clan. As if they had broken through an invisible barrier, the scene that was imprinted in their eyes was no longer a vibrant world, but a barren one. Insects of different sizes crawled on the ground and flew in the sky, searching for traces of the fairy clan, but found nothing. Seeing these ferocious insect race, Lu Yi clearly felt Lu Yingying's nervousness on his shoulder because his hair was being pulled. This race had all kinds of problems, cowardly, unreliable, but it was undeniable that they were a group of naive and kind little things. This kind of character was not suitable for survival in the starry sky. Perhaps it was because of this that they lost their home and had no choice but to come to the fairy tree realm to find a place to stay. Junior brother Lu, do you have any good suggestions? Looking at the many insect race that had sensed the two's aura and were aggressively rushing towards them, Yu Yaorao asked. Lu Yi slowly drew his blade and spat out a word, kill. Dealing with the insect race was simple and direct. There was no need to beat around the bush. His figure swept forward like an arrow leaving the bowstring. The sudden increase in speed made Lu Yingying couldn't help but cry out in alarm. She grabbed a strand of his hair with one hand and his collar with the other, so she didn't get thrown down. The creatures in the fairy tree realm wouldn't surpass the divine sea realm. It was not that they couldn't be born, but once they were born, they had to leave the fairy tree realm. This was also the only time when the reincarnation tree would actively expel creatures, because when one's cultivation reached the celestial realm, one would have the strength to cross the starry sky. Naturally, there was no need to stay in the fairy tree realm. Its many fairy tree realms were only provided for those creatures who couldn't survive in the starry sky to live. For the current Lu Yi, as long as they weren't in the celestial realm, he could kill them all. Everywhere he passed, there would be a rain of blood. Lu Yingying's screams didn't stop since the beginning. It was so noisy that Lu Ye's eardrums hurt. The corners of Yu Yaorao's mouth curled into a smile as she leisurely walked beside Lu Yi. She didn't seem to be making any movements, but none of the insects that approached from the left or right could get close to them. Once they broke through this limit, they would die inexplicably. One rushed forward in a straight line, while the other solved the problems on the left and right. They complemented each other well. She was observing Lu Yi. She didn't know what kind of world the 9 heavens were, but since he could be brought to the reincarnation tree by his elder, it must be a large world. In such a large world, it was impossible to not find a 9th-order Divine Sea Realm Master. However, Lu Yi, an 8th order, had come here, so there were only 2 possibilities. One was that he was stronger than a 9th-order master, and the other was that he had a strong background, so even if his cultivation wasn't high enough, he was still able to obtain this opportunity. Yu Yaorao wanted to know which was the case with Lu Yi. At this moment, the 2 of them were natural allies in this fairy tree realm, but if they passed the test here and entered the next stage, they might become opponents. Yu Yaorao naturally wouldn't miss such an opportunity to collect information at close range. After observing for a while, Yu Yaorao quickly determined that Lu Yi was the first possibility. The strength he showed was no worse than a 9th-order Divine Sea Realm Master, perhaps even higher. He thought to himself that this was indeed the case. In a large domain, there would always be some monstrous characters. In a place like the reincarnation tree, there were no experts from any domain who would casually bring people here. If they relied on their strong backing, not only would they lose face, they might even lose their lives. While she was observing Lu Yi, how could Lu Yi not be observing her? Although this wasn't the first time Lu Yi had come into contact with a cultivator from another world, it was the first time he had come into contact with someone from outside the starry sky. As a fellow 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator, he naturally wanted to know what kind of skills the other party had. As a result, he found that he couldn't see through her, because Yu Yaorao relied more on the power of her spirit artifact to kill enemies. She didn't show much of her own strength. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the enemies the 2 of them encountered weren't strong enough. Perhaps they would only be able to see their true strength when they encountered a strong enemy. Because they had to clear out the insects in the tree realm, the 2 of them didn't advance quickly, which attracted the scattered insects around them. Looking around, it was as if a storm of death was spreading out from the place where the monster race was hiding, leaving insect corpses everywhere it passed. Lu Yingying finally began to do something. After the initial panic, she didn't forget her duty and began to urge Zhu Yan to enhance Lu Ye's mountain coiling saber. Zhu Yan had a certain time limit and couldn't be maintained for a long time, only about half an incense stick's worth of time, so Lu Yingying had to restore it before it lost its effect. While Lu Yi was killing enemies, he was also silently sensing the Zhu Yan on his mountain coiling saber. Although this wasn't a spirit rune, there was obviously some similarity between the 2, because in terms of results, they could play the same role, just that Zhu Yan's was more powerful. His attainments in the Tao of spirit runes weren't low, and after the second transformation of his talent tree, he had gained the ability to deduce spirit runes. He wanted to see if he could reverse engineer a new spirit rune and make it have the same power as Zhu Yan. This was undoubtedly a bit whimsical, but it was a direction worth working towards. End of this chapter. Chapter 12:21. The fairy's Zhu Yan was very powerful. Most of the insects Lu Yi encountered during his raid were not powerful enough, but some of them were at the divine realm. Sea realm. This was not the land of the 9 continents. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the tree realm was rich and pure. Therefore, it was easy for them to reach the upper realm. It was the same for the insects. Therefore, the proportion of insects at the divine sea realm was not low. The insectoids themselves were covered with a thick layer of carapace, not to mention the divine sea realm insectoids. Those big insectoids, all of them had amazing defense. When Lu Yi killed the insects in the land of the 9 continents, he had to look for their weaknesses. But there was no need for that here. Wherever the Pan Mountain saber slashed, the insect's shells were cut open like tofu. This had something to do with the increase of his strength. But it was undeniable that Lu Yingying's Zhu Yan also played a huge role. After a long, fierce battle, the 2 killed many insects. Then, Yu Yaorao found a problem. Junior Marshall brother Lu, the nest is in this direction. She found that Lu Ye's raid direction was completely wrong. It was the opposite of where the nest was. She and Lu Yi did not know where the nest was, but the fairies knew. They just had to ask Wang Tong Tong. They would know. Since they wanted to deal with the insects here, they had to deal with the nest first. Only by dealing with the nest could they get to the root. They had to solve the problem. Not far ahead of her, Lu Yi quickly turned around and changed his direction. Yu Yaorao laughed. He was indeed a reckless soldier. He did not plan anything before he took action. He just went where he wanted to go. She had wronged Lu Yi. If Lu Yi was alone, he would definitely ask Lu Yingying for the location of the nest. Since he had companions, he would let them worry about it. Moreover, he was immersed in the mystery of the Zhu Yan. How could he care so much about it? The fan state in the tree realm was not very big because the fairy race did not have many people, and they occupied such a large tree realm. It was useless. Therefore, among all the tree realms, the fairy tree realm was relatively small. This saved the two human cultivators a lot of trouble. They continued to move forward. 2 hours later, a huge nest appeared in their field of vision. The two of them knew that they were going to see the truth. It was time. Although some of the insectoids they had encountered before were quite strong, there weren't many of them, and they weren't concentrated enough. It posed no threat to cultivators at their level, but it was definitely different in the insect nest. Normally, it would gather inside. The strongest insectoids in the hive were the insectoid guards, guarding the core of the hive. Yu Yaorao was about to open her mouth to discuss with Lu Yi. It was a coordinated plan, but Lu Yi suddenly flew forward and headed straight for that place. He crashed into the hive. She sighed in her heart. That was why she was most unwilling to cooperate with this kind of reckless soldier. He had no foresight or planning at all. It's all about instinct. Even if she was a genius of the 9 profound world, stronger than the average 9th order divine sea realm cultivator, she still couldn't face such a force. He didn't dare to be careless in the slightest when dealing with an insect nest of this scale. This was probably why the reincarnation tree had arranged for the two of them to come to the fairy tree realm. None of them had the ability to solve this problem on their own. Only by cooperating with each other could they succeed. With a loud bang, the saber light advanced, and the insect nest standing on the ground, along with the nearby insectoids, exploded one after another. Yu Yaorao looked up and saw that Lu Yi had disappeared. There was only a pitch-black tunnel leading to the original location of the insect nest. It was a tunnel deep underground. This guy. Yu Yaorao was speechless. She didn't feel much during the negotiations with the fairies before, but since the operation began, she had been passive all this time. She was not used to being led by the nose. Among the divine sea realm cultivators of the 9 profound world, she had always been the one who kept her word. This was the first time she had been led by someone else. This was the first time. But at this moment, she had no choice but to follow. Solving the problem of the fairy tree realm was a task shared by the two of them. She couldn't let the armament cultivator take the risk alone. She had no choice but to grit her teeth and follow him, rushing into the underground tunnel. As a Dharma cultivator, she had always been cautious. Before entering, she also activated a defensive spirit artifact to protect herself. She followed the aura of the Dharma cultivator all the way forward. Along the way, there were corpses of the insectoids. She didn't know how many he had killed. However, she was not afraid of losing the direction because there were constant shouts of green in front of her. She didn't know whether it was fear or excitement. Yu Yaorao felt that the former was more likely. She went all the way forward and finally caught up with the Dharma cultivator's pace. The space in the tunnel was not spacious. With the Dharma cultivator in front of her, she seemed to have nothing to do. She could seize the time to recover her spiritual power. There was bound to be a tough battle next. Although she was dragged into this situation by the Dharma cultivator, to be honest, in this kind of situation, in this environment, she could only go straight to the root of the problem. There was not much room for planning and operation. Fundamentally speaking, the test this time wasn't too complicated. The tunnel was very long and extended in all directions. However, under the investigation of divine sense, Lu Yi did not get lost. He killed all the way to the core of the insect nest. It was no different from the insect nests he had entered before. It was a huge underground space. All kinds of powerful auras were lurking here. They were the guards of the insect nest. Suddenly, they were surrounded by meat walls. 17. Like a grain of salt sprinkled into a pot of oil, when he and Yu Yaorao killed their way into this place, the hibernating insect clan guards woke up. They all woke up, hissed ferociously, and pounced toward the two of them. Yu Yaorao's heart trembled because she found that the number of insect clan guards here was more than she had expected. This was undoubtedly a bad start. In such a situation, the two of them should cooperate to kill the enemy. The two of them, one far and one close, was the best lineup. The Dharma cultivator was responsible for blocking in front of her. She activated her technique and moved around. Killing the enemy occasionally, it would be convenient for her to kill after taking control of the situation. However, the Dharma cultivator obviously did not have the intention to cooperate with others. After sensing the vast number of insect clan guards, it was as if he had beaten a chicken. Like blood, he brazenly rushed over. In the pitch-black core space of the insect nest, a dazzling and bright saber light suddenly flashed. The sound of breaking air. The screams of the insect clan and the screams of the green were intertwined. Yu Yaorao sighed. She knew that she could not count on the Dharma cultivator. In the end, she could only rely on herself. She did not have to count on her companions, but cooperating with each other was the best response. As the most outstanding of this generation of the Nine Mysteries world, the fact that the perverted divine sea realm could be brought to the reincarnation tree by the elders was the best proof. Compared to the brainless bravery of the Dharma cultivator, her response was much more conventional. First, she activated her power to protect herself. Then her body moved, avoiding the attacks of the insect clan, and began to look for targets to kill. Lu Yi only felt satisfied. What bone carapace, what big and small insects, under the enhancement of the fairy Zhu Yan's Pan-Shan saber. In front of him, they were all vulnerable. For the Dharma cultivator, there were only two kinds of enemies in this world. One was that he could cut off. The other was that he could not cut off. If he activated the sharp tack spirit pattern himself, it might take him some effort to kill these insect clan guards with amazing defense. With the enhancement of the green Zhu Yan, he could basically solve the problem in 2 or 3 slashes. One must know that the insect clan guards gathered here. They were all the elites of the elites. Zhu Yan's enhancement of a cultivator's strength was not, it was just a casual remark. Lu Ye's cultivation was still only at the 8th order, but the lethality of the Pan-Shan saber had more than just increased. It had greatly increased his combat effectiveness. In addition to killing the enemies, he even had the spare energy to pay attention to the situation on Yu Yaorao's side. In terms of the relationship between the two, they were allies. Although there was no substantial cooperation, since they could fight against each other here. It was a kind of cooperation in itself, so it was not good to ignore her. If she encountered any danger, he would naturally have to lend a hand to save her. On the other hand, he also wanted to know the true strength of this female cultivator from the 9 profound world. When Yang Qing brought him here, although he did not tell him much, after asking for a while, he also understood a lot of things. At the reincarnation tree, there must be a gathering of the monstrous cultivators of the various realms. To be brought here by their respective elders, they must be the most outstanding divine sea realm cultivators of each realm. This was a good opportunity to understand the strength of the various realms in the starry sky. Therefore, he wanted to know if the cultivators of the other realms were stronger or weaker than those of the 9 provinces. Then, he found that Yu Yaorao was very strong. Compared to the cultivators of the 9 provinces, what she showed now washer strength was not inferior to Yu Ji's state before she was promoted to the constellation realm. This was very outrageous. Yu Ji had settled in the divine sea realm for hundreds of years to have such a deep foundation, but Yu Yaorao was obviously only in her early 20s. Just in terms of age, the difference was unknown. He had to admit that these large realms could not be underestimated. Although their cultivators were in the upper realms, Compared to the 9 provinces, the time to settle in a certain realm would not be too long. However, because of the guidance of stronger cultivators, in terms of cultivation and fighting, he would be able to avoid many detours, and he would also be able to have a deeper foundation. The strength of a cultivator was not only the growth of their realm, but also their own inheritance and the teachings of the sect. If it was only the realm, then what was the meaning of cultivation? In the future, the cultivators of the 9 provinces would not be worse than those of the other realms, but for now, they were still inferior. Of course, for Yu Yaorao to be brought to the reincarnation tree by her elders, it meant that she was the top divine sea realm cultivator of the 9 profound world. Comparing the general situation of the 9 provinces with the top of the 9 profound world, it seemed a bit unfair. Moreover, Yu Yaorao was currently in the state of being blessed by the fairies Zhu Yan, so her combat strength was higher than hers. Her normal state was higher. But if the possibility of her not using her full strength was excluded, then her strength should be about the same as Yuji's. They were almost on par. So in the end, the 9 provinces was not bad. What the 9 provinces lacked now was only the top combat strength, the kind of person who could guard the 9 provinces. The strong person who could not let the 9 provinces be disturbed by external forces. Yang Qing could not be counted. He would leave the 9 provinces sooner or later, and Lu Yi could faintly feel that this time would not be too long. Chapter 12:22. Ever since the cultivators from 2 different domains broke into the core of the insectoid nest, the insectoids had never stopped hissing. As Lu Yi brandished his long saber, an insectoid guard was killed almost every few breaths. In Yu Yaorao's view, his actions were in line with the world's definition of a weapon cultivator, which was to not care about anything in a battle and just be reckless. But in fact, Lu Ye's fighting style was not so much reckless as it was extremely aggressive. This was a habit he had developed since he was weak. When facing an enemy, especially in the case of similar cultivation, the first thing to do was to suppress the opponent with momentum. If it was difficult to suppress the opponent with momentum, how could one kill? What's more, although his actions seemed reckless, in fact, he would never let himself be in danger. There were many guards in the core of this insectoid nest, which was probably related to the experience of the past generations. It should be known that he and Yu Yaorao were not the only ones who had come to the fairy tree world. Every 100 years, the avatar of the reincarnation tree would enter a cycle of reincarnation. Geniuses from various realms would gather here. Many times, geniuses from different realms would be sent to different tree realms by the reincarnation tree to participate in such tests. Almost every time, the fairy tree world would not fail, because the insectoids had never stopped plotting against the fairy race. In other words, even if Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao helped the fairies solve the problem of the tree world, it would not be long before a new batch of insectoids came back and built a new insectoid nest here to continue their invasion of the fairy tree world. The fairies had long been accustomed to such a life. For them, as long as they hid well in their own territory, the insectoids without much intelligence would never be able to find them, let alone capture them. As for what would happen to the other places in the fairy tree world, they did not care at all. After all, the insectoid nests here had been destroyed countless times in history. In order to deal with the destruction once 100 years, the new insectoid nest would naturally hatch more insectoid guards. In theory, even if 2 monsters from different domains joined forces, it would still take a lot of effort to solve the insectoid nest here. This was also the standard of a test. However, the reincarnation tree had clearly seriously underestimated Lu Ye's strength. Even if it was a starry sky treasure that had existed for countless years and had seen all kinds of monstrous characters, it was still not a human in the end. It lacked a clear understanding of the limits and eruptions of the human race. With such an insect nest, not to mention Yu Yaorao's cooperation, even if Lu Yi came by himself, he would be able to flatten it. When killing enemies, he would never allow himself to be surrounded by insectoid guards. Even though he had the ability to do things on his own, he would not end well if he was surrounded by insectoid guards. His strategy was to quickly kill a guard with 2 or 3 slashes, and then quickly move to another location. If he did not have the fairy's blessing, he would not have been able to cut the Gordian knot so quickly just by relying on the sharpness spiritual tattoo. If he wanted to kill such an insectoid guard, he would have to target its weak points or slash a few more times. In such an intense battle, even if an enemy slashed one more time, it would change the situation. The green Zhu Yan gave him the ability to quickly finish off the enemy. He could not help but wonder if Huang Tongtong and Lu Yingying were really unlucky to be chosen, or did Golden Sparkly do it on purpose? One Zhu Yan leaned towards the physical body, while the other leaned towards the weapon. It was obviously tailor-made for him and Yu Yaorao. However, it had to be said that although the fairy was timid, she was still very conscientious. Lu Yingying's screams never stopped, but she was always able to add a new Zhu Yan to Lu Ye's mountain pandao at the most appropriate time. The number of insectoid guards slowly decreased, and the situation began to become clear. Yu Yaorao sighed with emotion. Although she was somewhat dissatisfied that the weapon cultivator did not cooperate with her, but overall, the result was not bad. Moreover, the weapon cultivator accounted for the majority of the kills. This was something that could not be helped. She was a magic cultivator, so it was not so straightforward to kill the enemy, especially when the cultivation level of both sides was about the same. At this point in the battle, there was basically no suspense. The remaining insectoid guards were less than 30% of the initial number. With the strength of the two of them, it would not take long to kill them all. This was the advantage of cooperating with a weapon cultivator. They could often simplify complicated things. Although they were a bit reckless when doing things, they were relatively efficient. That being said, if Yu Yaorao had the chance to choose, she would still not be willing to cooperate with Lu Yi. There were too many uncontrollable aspects. Although the matter of a magic cultivator was more troublesome, it was better to be safe. Since the two of them broke into the core of the insectoid nest, it had been less than an hour. When the last insectoid guard was killed, the intense fluctuations of spiritual powers suddenly calmed down. At the same time, Lu Yingying's screams also calmed down. The little fairy had been grabbing Lu Ye's hair and collar. At this moment, she looked as if she was drunk. She was dizzy, swaying, and almost fell off Lu Ye's shoulder. Her two eyes were watery, and there were clear tear stains at the corners of her eyes. She was holding her mouth. This battle that had lasted less than an hour was definitely the most exciting thing she had experienced in her life. She was afraid that she would have nightmares for dozens of years. Yu Yaorao flew down from midair. She was different from Lu Yi, who was bursting with qi and blood and holding her blade. She had a calm expression on her face. The battle just now didn't affect her too much, except for the consumption of her spiritual power. Huang Tongtong, who was with her, also did not suffer any torture. Her expression was normal. She looked at Lu Yingying, who seemed to be scared out of her wits, and gave her a sympathetic look. She was only glad that she was assigned to the female cultivator's side. If she was assigned to the male cultivator's side, then the one who would be unlucky would be her. At the center of the insectoid nest, there was a huge meatball. As usual, it stored a huge amount of vitality and even condensed vitality nuclei. This was also the source of energy for the insectoids to hatch new members. As long as this meatball was destroyed and the place was burned clean, the insectoid nest could be considered to be uprooted. Lu Yi looked up at Yu Yaorao, and Yu Yaorao nodded slightly. Lu Yi raised his blade and chopped down. As if cutting a water bag, the meatball wall broke, but the vitality that should have flowed out did not leave any trace. Instead, it collapsed toward the center, and there was no trace of vitality nuclei. This made Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao somewhat puzzled. Both of them had dealt with the insectoids before, and they had also gone deep into many insectoid nests. What they saw in front of them seemed to be somewhat different from what they had experienced before. In the blink of an eye, a rotating vortex appeared in front of them, and a strange aura vaguely came from the opposite side. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. A door! Yu Yaorao, however, reacted. It should be the door to the insectoid tree world. Lu Yi pondered for a moment, and roughly understood what was going on. The reincarnation tree had many tree worlds. Every race that came to seek refuge with it would be arranged into a tree world. Logically speaking, the fairy tree world only had the fairy race. However, the reason why the insectoids of the insectoid tree world could invade was because they had used some method to open up two tree worlds. This was the reason why the insectoid disaster in the fairy tree world continued. As long as this passage to the insectoid tree world still existed, the problem could not be solved fundamentally. This time, they could be considered to have uprooted the insectoid nest, but after they left, there would be other insectoids coming from the opposite side to build a new insectoid nest. Lu Yi did not understand how to open up a passage between the tree worlds, but he was puzzled about one thing. Insectoids without intelligence can also do this to this extent. Yu Yaorao said, low-level insectoids naturally don't have this ability, but the insectoid race's characteristic is to plunder and invade. Among the insectoids, there are also existences with extremely high intelligence, just like the difference between demon beasts and demon beasts. Ordinary demon beasts do not have high intelligence, but once they open up and become demon beasts, they are no different from humans. Lu Yi could not help but think of the insectoid queen in the 9 regions insectoid race's big secret realm. That guy definitely had intelligence, but when the cultivators of the 9 regions besieged it, it never showed it, only when it was about to die did it shout out some inexplicable words. Now it seemed that the insectoids he came into contact with were indeed some low-level existences, which had nothing to do with the level of strength, because their intelligence was not high. However, among the insectoids, there were some that had opened up their intelligence, and that was the real insectoid race. The passage in front of him must be related to the real insectoid race. If they wanted to plunder the fairies, they naturally had to find a way to open up the passage between the two tree worlds. It could even be said that the insectoid race's plundering of rare species was not only limited to the fairy tree world, perhaps there were more tree worlds that had been invaded. Looking at the revolving portal passage, Lu Ye's expression was inexplicable. Yu Yaorao was slightly surprised. Junior brother Lu, you can't be thinking of… Lu Yi looked up at her and did not hide his thoughts. Senior sister Yu, what do you think? Yu Yaorao said, our test is only the fairy tree world, and we have already completed more than half of it. All that's left is to clean up the scattered insectoids in the fairy tree world, and the test will be considered complete. She did not say much, but her meaning was already clear. Lu Yi nodded slightly. That makes sense. There was a high probability that the other side was the insectoid tree world, and there were bound to be more insectoids inside. Rashly rushing in like this was obviously not a wise move, and it was very likely that they would fall into a sea of insectoids. This was also where Yu Yaorao's concern lay. A test was a test, and under the premise that it was within her ability, she was willing to accept such a test, but if she wanted to take the risk, she would have to think about it carefully. When the two of them were talking, the two fairies did not express much. Lu Yingying had yet to come back to her senses, while Huang Tongtong was indifferent, as if she had long been accustomed to the monsters who came to help making such a choice. What was certain was that Lu Yi and Yu Yaorao were not the only ones who had faced this choice. There must have been many other monstrous geniuses from various domains who had stood here and faced the same choice. However, since the fairy tree world had been constantly being invaded by the insect race, it went without saying what their choice was. End of this chapter. Chapter 12:23. Let's go. Yu Yaorao called out. The insectoid nest in the fairy tree realm had been destroyed, so all that was left was to clean up. As long as they killed all the insectoids scattered in the fairy tree realm, the two of them would pass this test. Overall, it was quite smooth. This was to be expected. The reincarnation tree realm's tests for the monsters of the various realms were never too difficult. Basically, they were all within the scope of what the monsters could solve. Thus, as long as they did not act recklessly, the monsters would be able to pass their own tests. Of course, there were also those who were unlucky and met with accidents, but such people were in the minority. Strictly speaking, this test was actually a kind of help. When the cultivators of the various fairy tree realms encountered Pai Juanbai, they would send requests to the reincarnation tree, and the reincarnation tree would arrange for the monsters to enter. The reincarnation tree would naturally not force them. Yu Yaorao had already turned around and walked out, and Lu Yi followed. However, after a while, she suddenly turned around and asked in shock, "Junior apprentice brother Lu, what are you doing?" Lu Ye's voice sounded, "I'll have to trouble senior apprentice sister to clean up. I'll go to the other side to broaden my horizons." After saying this, he stepped into the vortex and his figure quickly disappeared. Yu Yaorao gritted her teeth. Madman! She had never thought that this weapon cultivator would be this crazy, daring to wantonly enter the insectoid tree realm. Even though she had seen his recklessness before, she had never thought that he would make such a choice. The weapon cultivator had already disappeared, so there were only two paths in front of her. One was to follow the weapon cultivator and cooperate with him to kill the insectoids. The other was to ignore his life and death and continue to clean up. Yu Yaorao was very confident in her own strength, but not to the extent of being arrogant. This was the cautiousness of a spell cultivator, and it had nothing to do with her personality. Her master was unstoppable in the power realm because he knew himself and the enemy, but in the insectoid tree realm, no one knew what was going on. What was certain was that the insectoid tree realm had never been attacked before. After so many years of accumulation and development, the insectoids there were definitely not something this side could compare to. Furthermore, if they could not win here, they could still escape back to the fairy tree realm. In the insectoid tree realm, if they lost a battle, they would definitely die. Yu Yaorao did not believe that the weapon cultivator would not have thought of this. Even so, he still wanted to broaden his horizons. How dare he? She instinctively wanted to follow the pace of the weapon cultivator, but her own caution told her that this was not a wise choice. Just as she had said to Lu Yi before, their test was only in the fairy tree realm. The insectoid tree realm was not something they needed to interfere with. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end he sighed and turned to leave. She and Bing Xiu had only met by chance, and had become temporary allies under the arrangement of the reincarnation tree. They could help each other in the fairy tree realm, and if it was within her power, she did not mind lending a hand, but if Bing Xiu wanted to take risks, there was nothing she could do. Their relationship wasn't that good yet. On Yu Yaorao's shoulder, Huang Tongtong turned her head and looked at the place where Lu Yi had disappeared with an indescribable expression. Over the years, many guests had come to the fairy tree realm. Although they came from different races, they were all powerful. Almost every one of them could fight for a period of peace for the fairy tree realm, but in the end, they could only treat the symptoms and not the root cause. As long as the passage between the insectoid tree realm and the fairy tree realm was still there, the insectoids would make a comeback in less than 10 or 20 years. No one had ever dared to step into the passage of the insectoid tree realm like that human, and kill his way to the insectoid tree realm on the other side. Because this was not a test for the guests who came here. That human weapon cultivator was the first one. But Huang Tongtong did not know what he would do in the end, but she knew that Lu Yingying would definitely be frightened. 3 at this time, Lu Yi had already arrived at the insectoid tree realm. The transmission of the tree realm passage was only a matter of a moment. When Lu Yi stepped into the vortex, it was as if he had broken through a layer of membrane. Lu Yingying was not frightened, she was just a little dumbfounded. She turned her head and stared at Lu Yi in a daze, stuttering, You have been talking for a long time and you still can't say a complete sentence. Shut up, bless you Yen. Lu Yi raised his saber and shouted in a low voice. In the end, he could not sit back and do nothing. If he really did not have the ability, then so be it. The fairy tree realm had been like this for so many years, there was no need for him to take the risk. But if he had the ability to do so, he would feel uncomfortable if he did not do anything when he saw it. Mouth, especially when the target was the insectoids. Lu Yi had not come into contact with many races in the universe so far. After all, the world was limited, and his horizons were limited. However, the race he hated the most was undoubtedly the insectoids. This point, even if he came into contact with more races in the future, it would not change. Therefore, even though he knew that Yu Yaorao was right, he still turned around and killed his way in. As for whether he had the ability to solve the problem here, he would only know after he killed them. The location he appeared in was the core space of the insectoid nest. This was expected. Lu Yi suspected that the passage between the two tree realms could be opened because of the powerful vitality energy in the core of the insectoid nest. As for how it worked and how it started, he did not know. This was the insectoid's plan. They had obviously used some unknown means. In his perception, the core space of this insectoid nest was more than 10 times larger than the one in the fairy tree realm. In other words, the scale of the insectoid nest here must be extremely large. This was understandable. After all, it was the insectoid tree realm, the headquarters of the insectoids. At the Nutai house, the horses were riding on cloud power. Immediately, a rustling noise was heard from all directions. Who knows how many big bugs were coming? Countless insectoids began to rush toward Lu Yi. If Lu Yi was just a pure human weapon cultivator, he would never take such a risk. His personal strength was indeed strong, but there was a limit to human strength. Especially when he rashly broke into someone else's nest, it was easy to be besieged. At that time, no matter how strong he was, he would not have a good ending. He dared to break in. Naturally, he had something to rely on. When a few drops of blood essence exploded, there was the sound of rushing water. With him as the center, a blood-red color suddenly spread out in all directions. The blood-red color was boundless and fierce. The insectoids at the front immediately lost their footing and were sent tumbling. The blood-red light spread out and filled the entire core space in just a few breaths. Lu Yingying looked at this scene in shock. For a moment, she could not tell whether Lu Yi was a human or a vampire. Although the fairy race did not look at Feiqing, they had a long lifespan and a long heritage, so they were all experienced and knowledgeable. Lu Yingying could naturally tell at a glance that Lu Yi was using the blood race's blood river technique. Did the blood river technique have such a vast volume? In her understanding, the so-called blood river technique was Jingyu's orchid Dao could be seen, but how was this a river of blood in her eyes? It was simply a sea of blood. This was still limited by the space of the insectoid nest. If there were no restrictions, who knew how large it would be? However, it was said that there were also humans who cultivated blood arts. When they activated the power of blood arts, it looked like there were not many examples of blood arts, but Lu Yingying had only heard of it. She had never seen it before. This time, she had learned something new. The blood river technique was Lu Ye's biggest reliance to break into this place. Breaking into other people's territory, one would not have any advantage in terms of terrain, but the blood river technique could create one's own terrain. With the cover of the blood river, it would be difficult for him to be besieged. What he had to do next was simple. He had to kill all the insectoid guards trapped in the blood river and completely destroy this insectoid nest. There was no need to spread out his divine sense. In the blood river, every drop of blood was Lu Ye's feelers. He could clearly feel the movement of the insectoids in it. In the fairy tree world's insectoid nest, he did not use the blood river technique because there was no need. Moreover, with Yu Yaorao by his side, it would be easy for people to misunderstand. But here, it was different. He was alone, so he could be unscrupulous. Kakaka. Lu Yingying was still shocked by the volume of the blood river technique that Lu Yi used. Suddenly, a crisp sound rang in her ears. She quickly turned her head and saw that the human cultivator was holding a piece of top-grade spirit stone in his hand and was chewing on it. The key point was that there was only half of the top-grade spirit stone left. Lu Yingying was dumbfounded again. She felt that what she saw today was as unreal as a dream. Could a human eat spirit stones? What kind of divine fetus was this? For Lu Yi, blood crystals and monster cores could be eaten. So, why couldn't he eat spirit stones? He stuffed the remaining half of the spirit stone into his mouth and quickly replenished the spiritual energy he had consumed before. Then he shook his long saber. Let's go. Lu Yingying woke up from a dream and hurriedly blessed Lu Yi. His figure flitted across the blood river, and in the blink of an eye, he pounced in front of a large insectoid. The large insectoid was struggling. Because of Lu Ye's control, the surrounding blood river had an extremely strong binding force. It was not to the extent that it could not move, but it was still somewhat inconvenient. The surface water of Fan Yu Yong had greatly restricted its perception, so when Lu Ye's saber slashed down, it only after Lu Ye's attack did it realize it. It wanted to dodge or block, but it was already too late. The mountain saber ruthlessly chopped down on its back. Its hard bone carapace was simply unable to withstand the sharpness of the saber, and a 1-foot-deep wound was directly cut open. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. That was because the power of the saber was somewhat unexpected. The mountain saber seemed to have become even sharper. By the second slash, the large insectoid had already split into two. Its body was split in two and blood flowed out. Lu Ye's figure did not stop, and he directly pounced on the next insectoid. It was still 2 slashes. A moment later, Lu Yi discovered the source of the problem. The blessing that Lu Yingying had given him seemed to have become even stronger. Pin the insectoid nest in the fairy tree world. He had often needed 3 slashes to kill the insectoid guards. But here, he could finish them off with 2 slashes. There was no need for a third. Chapter 12:24. Zhong Yingying's mental state was obviously a little different. When she was in the fairy tree realm, this little fairy was in an extremely uneasy mood, especially when Lu Yi was rushing back and forth to kill the enemy. She was shouting nonstop. But at this moment, she did not shout at all. She was still terrified, but she kept her mouth shut. Her pair of watery eyes were filled with determination and excitement. Since ancient times, so many guests had come and gone in the fairy tree realm, but none of them had made the same choice as this human soldier cultivator. No matter what his original intention was when he made this choice, no matter what the outcome would be, he was still working for the fairies. With such a premise, how could Lu Yingying not be grateful? How could she not do her best to assist? What's wrong with you? Were you slacking off before? Lu Ye's voice sounded. The little fairy was a little wronged. No, it's just that the power of our fairy race is related to willpower. If the willpower is strong, the words are strong. If the willpower is weak, the words are weak. Lu Yi understood. Because the fairies themselves did not care much about the insectoids in the fairy tree realm. They had always known that there was no one there. Fa gave her strength to support Zhu Yan, which was equivalent to completing the task given to her by her race. But now it was different. When he stepped into the passage to the fairy tree realm and came to the insectoid fairy tree realm, Lu Yingying had a firm will to support him. In this way, her Zhu Yan's power would also become stronger. Can it be stronger? Lu Yi asked. Lu Yingying's face flushed red, as if she was holding back her strength. I'll try. Lu Yi laughed. Don't force yourself too much. If Zhu Yan was strong enough to let him kill a insectoid guard with 1 slash, then this battle would be twice as easy. But now, killing one with 2 slashes was already very good. Wherever his figure passed, powerful auras followed one after another. What a loss. It had to be said that when the Ajioshu spread out, it was the best way to teach people how to love righteousness and not half-love. When spread out in Zhonghai, it made it very difficult for Jingyu to gather into a group, and it was also very difficult to find his trace in this chaotic. If it wasn't for the fact that he had something to rely on, Lu Yi would not have broken in alone. As expected, Yu Yaorao did not follow him in. If she wanted to come, she would have shown up long ago. Lu Yi would not interfere. After all, they were strangers who met by chance. Tai Yi didn't have too many friends, but he wouldn't force others to come here. This doesn't make sense. Aphids dashed through the insect path. In the starry sky, there were all kinds of races, but there were also other races with huge bodies below the human race. The insect race was one of them. This was due to the insect race's powerful incubation ability and unique slow system. In the cosmos, the insect race occupied many realms. Mouth the Bug tribe naturally had the right to participate in the Battle of the Divine Ocean that occurred once every 100 years. Yen Yen was one of them. This time, he had followed the elders of his race here. Firstly, he wanted to participate in the upcoming battle for the Divine Ocean. Secondly, he wanted to retrieve some things from the insectoid tree realm. A place like the tree world could only be entered by warriors of the spirit sea realm at most, so his seniors couldn't enter this place. The insectoids had been plotting in the tree world for tens of thousands of years, and during that time, they had made some decent gains. However, in the past few hundred years, they had not made any gains, until this time. All of the loot was stored in the core space of the hive, so he needed to retrieve it. The mission was simple. He just needed to bring the loot back. However, just as he was about to leave the insect path, behind him, he could faintly feel a violent fluctuation of spiritual power. He turned his head back to look, his expression bewildered. After sensing for a while, he finally confirmed that it was from the core of the hive. It seemed like someone had barged in. Who was it? Yen didn't know, but the insect race's tree world was connected to at least a dozen other tree worlds. Therefore, if there was really a powerful being, it must have come from one of the dozen or so tree worlds. It was most likely a human, because in the cosmos, humans love to meddle in other people's business the most. Approximately, the human prodigy who came to the tree world had solved the problem of the tree world and entered this place through the tree world's tunnel. How audacious of him! The insect race's tree world had stood here for tens of thousands of years. It was not that no prodigies had barged in, but those prodigies basically didn't have a good ending. After tens of thousands of years of development and accumulation, the strength of the insect race's tree world was not something the insects of the other tree worlds could compare to. This place had always been prepared to deal with intruders, especially during this period. After thinking for a while, Yen changed his direction and followed the insect path all the way down. He wanted to see who was so daring as to come to the insect race's tiger's whiskers. Stone, since he could follow his elders to the reincarnation tree, he was naturally a prodigy in this realm. Such people were usually very confident and didn't think they were inferior to anyone. The further he went, the more shocked he was. This was because he sensed that the insect race guards' auras were disappearing too quickly. It was almost to the point of one per breath. If he didn't know that the tree world didn't allow traces of constellation realm powerhouses, Yen would probably think that it was a constellation realm powerhouse who did this. In his shock, he hurriedly retracted his aura and hid his tracks. As a member of the insect race, even if he knew that there was a very powerful powerhouse up ahead, he couldn't just sit by and watch. The insect race had invested a lot in the tree world on the reincarnation tree's side and had planned for a very long time. If the hive here was destroyed, the losses would be immeasurable. Of course, they could send another race to occupy another tree world, and he believed that the reincarnation tree wouldn't refuse. However, they could forget about opening a passage to another tree world. If that was the case, occupying a tree world would be meaningless. The insect path was long. When Yen arrived at the entrance of the core space, he was greatly shocked when he took a closer look. Unlike what he had imagined, the one who came here to meddle in other people's business wasn't a human. It was actually a vampire. He didn't see any vampires. What he saw was a dense blood-red color. The entire hive's core was enveloped in a sea of blood. How could this be? As the two most notorious raiding races in the universe, the insect race and the vampire race were natural allies. Any race in the universe could oppose the insect race except the vampire race. That was because everyone knew that a single tree couldn't hold up the sky. Only by working together could they gain a firm foothold in the vast universe. Therefore, Yen was very puzzled. Why would a vampire come here and start a massacre? Could it be that he wanted a share of the loot? Thinking of this, Yen could not help but feel a little annoyed. He swore that he had heard from his elders that the vampires were extremely greedy. He had heard that the insectoids had made arrangements at the reincarnation tree and had always been trying to interfere. However, allies were allies, and interests were interests. The insectoids had paid a huge price to make arrangements at the reincarnation tree, so how could they easily let other races benefit from it? Therefore, he had always rejected the blood breed's requests directly. Was he trying to destroy it because he couldn't get it? Or were they using this opportunity to put pressure on the insectoids? Just as the aphid was thinking, the blood in front of him suddenly turned red. It wriggled and expanded, quickly wrapping around him. Oh no! Yen knew that he had been exposed, although he did not understand why he was exposed. He had been very careful when he came here, and the other party was making a ruckus here. Logically speaking, they should not have discovered him. Boys, however, the changes in the blood sea before his eyes undoubtedly meant that he had been exposed. The other party wanted to drag him into the sea of blood. Never compete with the vampires in the blood sea. This was the consensus of all the star races, so when they saw the blood sea expanding, the aphid immediately retreated. However, the blood sea was expanding too quickly, and without any warning, even if Yanji raised his speed to the limit, he could not avoid the blood sea's wrapping. He couldn't dodge. Immediately after, Yanji felt a surge of wealth. The aura of the invasion pillar had locked onto him, as if a knife had suddenly hung above his head. He could choose to continue retreating, hoping to escape from the blood sea. However, this possibility was not high. No matter how fast he could not be faster than the blood sea. Once he was wrapped up, it would be difficult for him to escape. Therefore, after realizing that something was wrong, he made a prompt decision. Instead of retreating, he rushed toward the core space of the hive. Going back meant that he had to face this expert alone. Looking at the size of the other party's blood sea and the power of his aura, Yanji felt that he was most likely not a match for him. Therefore, he needed help. The guards of the hive's core were his natural helpers. Therefore, even if he did not want to leave, he could only escape into the blood sea. As soon as he entered the blood sea, he immediately felt the stickiness of his surroundings, causing his speed to decrease greatly. However, since he dared to barge in, he naturally had something to rely on. He did not know what kind of method he had used. His speed, which should have been reduced, suddenly increased again, and he quickly swam in the blood sea. Lu Yi was not far behind him, chasing closely. At the same time, he clicked his tongue in wonder. Although in his previous conversation with Yu Yaorao, he had already realized that his previous view of the insect race was too one-sided, and the insect race he had come into contact with, other than the insect queen in the insect race's great secret realm, the rest were all low-level insect race. However, he did not expect that he would be able to see a true high-level insect race so quickly. The guy who had barged in was completely different from the insect race he knew. At first glance, the other party was almost no different from a human. He had all the characteristics of a human, but in some details, he was not quite the same as a human. First, this guy's head was pointy, as if he was wearing a pointy hat. Secondly, this guy's eyes were a pair of hexagonal compound eyes. They were very large and bulged outwards, as if his eyeballs were about to burst. It looked extremely comical. Under this pair of compound eyes, there was a pair of even smaller eyes, growing on the left and right sides of his cheeks. After that, his hands did not have 5 fingers, only 3. Of course, the most obvious abnormality was the pair of gray fleshy wings on his back, which looked like a bat's wings. Even though Lu Yi had seen all kinds of insect race before, it was difficult for him to connect this person's appearance to any insect race. He was more like a combination of several insect race characteristics placed on a human body. Chapter 12:25. The Blood River art was the culmination of the Blood race's secret art. It combined both offense and defense, and its power was closely related to its size. It did not mean that the bigger the Blood River, the better. On the contrary, the bigger the blood river, the harder it would be to control it, and the weaker its power would be. Lu Yi had no other choice this time. If he wanted to move unhindered in the hive, he could only fill it with the blood sea. To him, the blood sea was only a means to assist him in killing the enemy, and it was not the factor that determined victory or defeat. Even so, the blood sea's power could not be underestimated. This could be seen from the reactions of the insect race guards that were killed. Even though they were not weak, they were still restrained by the blood sea's power. The insect race expert who had suddenly barged in did not seem to be affected at all. Through the blood sea's feedback, Lu Yi could clearly sense a mysterious power lingering around the insect race expert. It was this power that prevented the blood sea from restraining him in any way. The insect race expert could move freely in the blood sea like a fish in water. These monstrous geniuses from various domains were indeed not to be underestimated. This move alone could not be done by the Divine Sea Realm experts of the 9 provinces. Of course, this might be a unique ability of the insect race. Just as Lu Yi was observing the insect race genius while chasing after him, the insect race expert suddenly opened his mouth and whistled. An extremely penetrating sound instantly spread in all directions. The next moment, the insect race guards floating in the blood sea, who were dizzy and unable to distinguish north from south, seemed to have received some kind of order and rushed in his direction. Lu Ye's figures suddenly sped up. It would be reasonable to say that no one was weaker than him in a battle of the same realm. The starry sky was vast, and there were many capable people. Who would dare to say that they had enemies in the same realm? There were always mountains and no mountains, and there were no people below them. However, it would be too much to say that he had fought someone stronger than him. However, things were not quite right because the insect race expert had died. Later on, when he sensed the speed at which the insect race guards were killed, he knew that the insect race expert was extremely powerful. It was only when they really fought that he realized that he had overestimated his opponent. The two figures instantly engaged in a fierce battle. Clanging sounds rang out one after another, and a calm fiery light emerged from the sea of blood. What made me even more fearful was that while he was fighting with me, he was also killing the insectoid guards that had gathered because of my whistle. The fact that I could roam freely in the blood sea didn't mean that I could take on so few enemies all by myself. I relied on taking them down one by one. These insectoid bodyguards might not be strong, but they weren't lacking in intelligence. Before they were trapped in the blood sea, they could only act on their instincts. There was no way for them to form a large-scale force. Even if a few of them were to gather together, Lu Yi would take care of them first. Yenya gritted his teeth and used all his strength to protect himself. Then, pain shot through his body, followed by the pain of his soul being torn apart. I couldn't help but scream. Aphid didn't notice the instant Lu Yi sped up. It was only because I felt a chill on my back, causing my entire body to tense up. I hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please hurry." Lu Yi found that the insectoid's body was weak. It was even weaker than the bone carapace of the insectoid bodyguards. Without the support of the green Zhu Yen, the bone carapace of these insectoid bodyguards was only slightly softer to me, but it was still a matter of 2 slashes. However, the insectoid's body was much weaker than the bone carapace. In that case, the world boundary where the insectoid race was located was the same as the insect race's tree world. I didn't understand this at all. If I had known this earlier, why would I have turned back to watch? I would have caused a disaster for no reason. What shocked me the most was that in the close combat, I noticed that the other party's cultivation was only at the 4th order Divine Sea Realm. I continued to remain silent. While Lu Yi was thinking over there, Yenya's heart was in turmoil. Pang Jian had never heard of an insect emperor world, but he guessed that it was a weak world boundary occupied by the insect race. Fast my ass. If my foundation was weak, I would have been defeated in just a few breaths. A dozen or so slashes later, my entire body was cut in half. During that time, Pang Jian even killed a few insectoid bodyguards that surrounded me. How was that possible? But the low-level insectoid that suddenly retreated didn't have the ability to gather high-level insectoids, so I couldn't tolerate it. Lu Yi glanced at the body that was cut in half by me and found that it was just an empty shell. I didn't have the habit of talking nonsense with the enemy. Since they were taking advantage of my weakness to take my life, why would I waste time to give them time to recover? Lu Yi ignored my words and arrived in front of me in just 8 breaths. His mountain-coiling saber swept up a saber light and slashed at me. "Fellow Taoist, please be quick. You are Yenya from the Insect Emperor world. Do you know which blood world you come from?" Yenya hurriedly spoke. I was afraid that if I spoke too late, I would have another chance. His cultivation was higher than mine by a minor realm. The might of the soul-severing saber was still as sharp as ever. Anyone who was caught off guard and was hit by this saber would have a terrible performance. With the sea of blood surrounding us and the peaceful battle, I didn't have the spare energy to investigate my opponent's situation. I also knew that the one I was fighting with wasn't some vampire, but a human. Naturally, It was Han Hu. Sitting on the shoulder of that human was a great Fey that could cast Zhu Yan. Lu Ye's heart moved. Then, he mistook you for a blood race? His saber danced, accompanied by Yen Ye's screams. Slashes fell one after another. One must know that even if it was me, I wouldn't be able to kill the insectoid bodyguards so efficiently. Although the insectoid bodyguard outside was only a high-level insectoid, his strength was obvious. He wouldn't kill anyone just because he wanted to. That guy, he actually used a golden cicada shedding its carapace. What kind of strange ability was that? But since he was an insectoid, it was strange that he didn't have any strange abilities. What the hell? Lu Yi was a little clear-headed. I knew that the other party didn't have any gains, but that insectoid clearly misunderstood something. This was a classic example of using money to buy a life. Blocking and dodging were the only things that mattered. To be able to scheme like this in the tree world, it must be a top-tier realm. How could a Spirit Sea realm monster from a top-tier realm be weak? Lu Yi was slightly surprised. He didn't expect that the insectoid guy was also a weapon cultivator, and his strength was quite weak. The power behind the other's blade was extremely violent. As the blade chopped down, I felt as if I was not blocking a blade, but rather a small mountain pressing down on me. The speed of the blade was also very fast, almost transforming into a shadow of a blade. Moreover, the angle of the blade was also extremely tricky. After just a few breaths of time, Yenya was already sweating profusely. In that blood sea, all kinds of schemes and tricks were put to use. One could only put on a high profile. For existences like us, in that kind of battle, announcing the realm we came from was a kind of bravado. But in the blood sea, where could I run? In the fierce battle, Yenya was under less and less pressure. In just 10 breaths of time, my movements were a beat faster. I could only watch as a sharp saber light slashed at me. Lu Ye's silence was suspicious, making Yen Ye's heart feel at ease. But before he felt the faint murderous intent coming from Lu Ye's side, he still gritted his teeth and said, "You know what fellow Taoist wants. You're also deceiving fellow Taoist. That time, you didn't have a total of 8 portions of harvest. For Lu Yi in a battle, he only needed to hit once. The rest was complicated because the impact of the soul-severing saber would cause the enemy to fall into intense pain in an instant. The Insect Emperor realm was famous in that part of the universe. As long as one was slightly ignorant, they should have heard of it, especially the blood race. Yenya's mouth was full of bitterness. He really didn't expect that he would fall into such a life-or-death crisis just to carry out a mission to pick up the goods. I was born in the Insect Emperor realm, the most outstanding divine sea realm insect of my generation. But I was suppressed by an opponent 1 level higher. People would be suspicious if I told them. If I continued to fight like that, Lu Yi would kill all the insects outside sooner or later. Moreover, I would have to pay any price. I suddenly understood. Once I used the Blood River art, anyone would misunderstand. Just as I was about to raise my saber again, Yenya said, "The blood race and your insect race are the strongest allies in the universe. Fellow, I'm afraid you didn't misunderstand what you did outside. I know where they came from, and I know what they're doing outside. But since they're already here, it's only a matter of life and death." That saber strike had only left a deep or shallow wound on the opponent's chest. It wasn't too serious, but it had also injured the opponent's foundation. Even the 2 pestles in my hands were the best spirit treasures. In the universe, even Constellation Realm cultivators would covet them. Yenya secretly cursed the blood race for being greedy, but he could only say sadly, "At least give fellow Taoists 2 portions. You have to bring 1 back to report. Also, fellow Taoist doesn't need to worry that you will tell the elders in your realm. If this matter is exposed, the first one to suffer will be you. I can't be sure that guy is a monster from a realm controlled by the insect race, just like Yu Yaorao's status in the 4 mysterious realms. Otherwise, he wouldn't have appeared in that place. When did the blood race stop playing with swords? Do those guys only doubt my blood arts and sharp claws? Although I avoided a disaster, that insect guy's aura was clearly much healthier. If it was any other battle situation, I would have run far away and definitely wouldn't be standing there. Yenya shouted angrily and turned around to block. 2 pestles appeared in my hands out of nowhere. They weren't even half a zhang long. I didn't know what material they were made of, but they looked weak and heavy. The real enemy hadn't escaped to the side yet. His face was pale and his eyes were filled with fear. Almost every 2 slashes killed one. This slow method of cutting the Gordian knot made one's scalp tingle. Chapter 12:26. After that, Yenya added, if fellow Taoist is still not satisfied, then we can only fight to the death. I may not be fellow Taoist's opponent, but I can still destroy those things before I die. How to choose, fellow Taoist can decide. He would not beg others to spare his life. Since the other party appeared here, many things were obvious. Blindly begging for mercy would only make others worse, especially the blood race, who were known for their greed. Appropriately lowering one's posture and sticking to the bottom line was the correct way for people like them to get along. Lu Ye's thoughts turned. The situation now was very clear. The other party had mistaken him for a blood race, and then mistakenly thought that he had come here to fight for something. He had 3 portions of the harvest here, and was willing to give up 2 portions at most to let him go. As for what the harvest was, Lu Yi did not know, but he could roughly guess. But then again, were the blood race and the insect race allies? This was a strange thing, but on second thought, these 2 races were not good things. They loved to invade and plunder other people's domains. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. If Yenya did not mention the 3 portions of the harvest, he would have definitely raised his sword and attacked. But since he had guessed, it was not good to let the other party destroy jade and common stone. He said indifferently, okay. Yenya finally breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that this blood race did not care, then he could only fight to the death while destroying the 3 portions of the harvest. There was no chance of winning, and there was a high chance that he would die here, but he could not let others take advantage of him. Words are no guarantee. Fellow Taoist, please make a great bloodline oath. Yenji did not relax his vigilance just because Lu Yi had agreed to his proposal. Throughout history, there had been countless people who had been ambushed and killed because of a slight relaxation of vigilance. The advanced insectoids were cunning, but weren't the vampires the same? Another great bloodline oath. Lu Yi had heard this from Little Nine. It was said that the only thing that could bind Yang Qing was a great bloodline oath. Because the dragon race valued their bloodline very much, once an oath was made, it could not be violated. The blood race also had a bloodline system. When Lu Yi refined the sacred blood, he had obtained many blood race secret techniques, but he really did not know about the great bloodline oath. How was this thing supposed to be made? If the process was wrong or the oath was wrong, the other party would definitely be suspicious. He could only pretend to be dignified. You don't believe me? Yenji said in a low voice, if Dao friend does not swear, then we will fight to the death. As he said this, he reached for his waist and 3 bags appeared in his hand. He was in the blood sea, and due to the interference of the blood sea, he couldn't see Lu Yi clearly. But Lu Yi could use the blood sea's senses to see what was going on at his side. He then realized that the 3 bags he took out were actually 3 spirit beast bags. Sure enough, it was just as he thought. These 3 spirit beast pouches contained the 3 portions of the Zerg's harvest this time. Just as Lu Yi was considering whether or not he should make a random oath to see if he could fool the other party, Lu Yingying's voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Fairies were indeed unreliable and timid. However, due to their long lifespan and some special reasons, they were also one of the most knowledgeable races. Lu Yi didn't understand the blood race's great blood oath, but Lu Yingying did. His expression didn't change as he slowly said, Li Taibai of the blood realm swears in the name of the supreme blood ancestor. If Dao friend Yen Ji of the insect emperor world is willing to give me 2 portions of the harvest, then I will let him go and will not disturb him. As his voice sounded, the blood sea that filled the entire core of the Zerg's nest surged violently, and many large and small undercurrents appeared out of thin air. It was as if the great blood oath had placed some restrictions on him, but in fact, Lu Yi had only slightly activated the blood sea's power. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to convince others. This was also Lu Yingying's suggestion. It had to be said that if Lu Yingying wasn't by his side this time, he wouldn't have been able to achieve this level of realism. As Lu Ye's voice fell, he clearly felt that Yan Ji on the opposite side relaxed a lot. Although there was still reluctance on his face, he was no longer as vigilant as before. He raised his hand and threw out 2 of the 3 spirit beast pouches in his hand. Lu Yi controlled the undercurrents of the blood sea and guided them in front of him. He carefully examined them and made sure that the other party didn't do anything to them before he put them away. An unexpected harvest. He came through the Tree Realms passage this time just to solve the Zerg's nest here. He didn't expect to meet a powerhouse of the Zerg clan, and he didn't expect things to develop to this point. The other party still had a spirit beast pouch. He had to make it complete no matter what. 2-inch Li Taibai of the Blood Realm. Yanji whispered softly, "I'll remember you. But please don't worry, Dao friend. Today's matter is between you and me, and no third person will know." As he said before, if the matter here was leaked, the first unlucky one would be him. The higher-ups of the Insect Emperor world would definitely hold him accountable. By then, even if he was talented, his future would be bleak. After saying that, Yan Ji turned around and rushed toward the Zerg's path. His divine sense had been locked onto Lu Ye's position. Although there was the blood race's great blood oath as a restraint, he didn't think that this blood race would have the courage to violate the oath. But he still had to be cautious. This was also a necessary state of mind for cultivators of all major races to travel the starry sky. The other party didn't have any intention of stopping or moving. He just silently waited for him to leave, which made Yan Ji very satisfied. He was getting closer and closer to the Zerg's path. Through the edge of the blood sea, he could vaguely see the vague outline of the Zerg's path. With another step, he was already out of the blood sea. Only then did Yan Ji's whole body completely relax. It was also at this time that in the blood sea, 2 void spiritual tattoos formed at the same time. One appeared under Lu Ye's feet, and the other appeared at the edge of the blood sea behind Yan Ji. The 2 void spiritual tattoos collapsed the moment they formed, but Lu Yi, who was originally standing in the depths of the blood sea, appeared behind Yan Ji like a ghost. In the past, Yang Qing had shown his elusive means in front of Lu Yi and the cultivators of 9 regions more than once. He could suddenly appear and disappear, and no one in 9 regions could see his movement trajectory, which made people exclaim in amazement and sigh with emotion. Compared with Yang Qing's method, Lu Ye's current method was indeed very different, but the effect was the same. This was also the reason why he had always wanted the void spiritual tattoos to appear on his talent tree. It was because he used the void spiritual tattoos as the foundation to construct a very special attack method. This method required him to construct 2 void spiritual tattoos at the same time in an instant, and with the help of the void spiritual tattoos, he could perform a short-distance transmission. The derivation of the void spiritual tattoos had long been completed. Now, it was branded on the newly burned leaves of the talent tree. Perhaps it was not perfect and needed to be improved, but right now, it was already the limit of what Lu Yi could deduce. It would not be too late to deduce and modify it in the future when his cultivation level gradually increased and his attainments in the Tao of Spirit tattoos improved. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't have to worry about the possibility of failure at all. And every drop of blood in the blood sea could be used as a carrier and medium to construct the void spiritual tattoos. Yenya walked out of the blood sea, thinking that he was safe after escaping the cage. Little did he know that the moment he relaxed his mind was the moment Lu Ye's killing move exploded. Under normal circumstances, even if he did not use such a sudden sneak attack, Lu Yi had the ability to kill Yenya here. The previous battle had already proved this point, but in order to prevent the other party from destroying the last spirit beast pouch, he could only do this. Yenya did not expect that there would be a blood clan member in this world who dared to ignore the bloodline oath he had just made. This was something that was impossible to happen, so he relaxed his vigilance because he subconsciously felt that he was safe. By the time he realized that something was wrong and wanted to resist, it was already too late. At the entrance of the insect path, at the edge of the blood sea, a large sun suddenly rose and bloomed like a lotus, but the petals of the lotus were sharp blade lights. Even a lion would use all its strength to hunt a rabbit. Since Lu Yi wanted to take down the other party in the shortest time possible, why would he hold back? Therefore, he used his strongest killing move right from the start. A severed arm flew out, holding onto a spirit beast pouch. Lu Yi raised his hand and picked it up, looking forward calmly. The blade lights slowly dissipated, and Yenya, who was missing an arm, stood where he was. His protruding compound eyes were about to explode. This was because the one standing in front of him was not a Blood Clan member, but a human. How was this possible? Yenya clearly wanted to say something, but he could no longer speak. A gentle breeze blew by outside the tunnel. His entire body collapsed, turning into pieces of broken corpses. Blood flowed everywhere. One Lu Yi bent down and picked up the 2 pestles in his hand. After a quick inspection, he found that the material was extremely good and of high quality. This was definitely not a material that could be produced in an ordinary region. There was a high chance that it was obtained from a galaxy or the Insect Emperor world. He was very satisfied. He had the material to reforge the Pan Mountain Saber. To Lu Yi, the Pan Mountain Saber was not something that could be easily given up. However, as his cultivation continued to increase, the Pan Mountain Saber would have to be upgraded. Once or twice was fine, but after a few more times, accidents were inevitable. Fortunately, he had obtained the Soul Cutter from the War Merit Pavilion. It could be perfectly integrated into the Pan Mountain Saber, and under his control, it could form many restrictions to improve the quality of the Pan Mountain Saber. Thus, after obtaining the soul-severing blade, it became very simple to reforge the Pan Mountain blade. All he had to do was continuously improve the quality of the Pan Mountain blade and make it more compatible with his current cultivation. As for the restrictions on the blade, he could completely replace them with the soul-severing blade. This perfectly avoided the possibility of the Pan Mountain Saber breaking or being destroyed in the process of upgrading. Other than that, there was also a ring on Yenya's hand. It looked very ordinary, and Lu Yi did not know what it was for. He picked it up and inspected it. He found that it was full of restrictions, and it felt very familiar. It was like an extremely complicated restriction lock. Chapter 12:27. This is for storage? Lu Yi asked as he held the ring. Lu Yingying said, "This is a various object ring. Only cultivators above the constellation realm can refine it." Good. Strange, this human is so strong, but why does he look like he hasn't seen the world before? He doesn't even know what a storage ring is. How could Lu Yi know what a storage ring was? The constellation realm had only appeared recently in the 9 states, so no one could refine it. Everyone used things like storage bags. He was curious why Yenya didn't have a storage bag, but it turned out that he had something more advanced. The restriction locks on storage bags were not complicated. Because of the quality of the storage bag, it was not difficult for locksmiths to break the restriction locks on storage bags. Lu Yi had worked as a locksmith for a period of time to familiarize himself with the construction and deciphering of spirit tattoos. However, it wasn't easy for him to get started with the restriction lock in the storage ring because it was too complicated. The slightest mistake would destroy it. "I can do it," Lu Yingying said in a low voice. "What?" Lu Yi didn't understand. "I can help you break the restriction lock in here. Fairies are born with such means." 1. Lu Yi tossed the storage ring to Lu Yingying, then turned and charged back into the Blood Sea. Because of Yenya, he hadn't killed all the insectoid guards here. Continuing with his previous method, he killed the insectoid guards one by one. It took him another hour to kill all the insectoid guards. The Blood Sea closed, and the core space of the insectoid nest was filled with corpses. The elite forces that the insectoids had accumulated over the past 10,000 years were all slaughtered. However, this was not the end. As long as the insectoid nest was still here, the insectoids could make a comeback. Therefore, if he wanted to get rid of them, not only would he have to destroy the insectoid nest here, he would also have to kill all the insectoids in the entire insectoid tree world. Lu Yi felt a headache coming on. When he barged in, he didn't think so much. He only thought about it. He wanted to kill some insectoids, but everything had to be finished. It was fun to kill, but it had to be done beautifully. Lu Yi considered his next course of action and gradually came up with some ideas. Lu Yingying had already broken the restriction lock on the storage ring. Lu Yi took it and checked it with great interest. In the end, he found that there was nothing good inside, only some basic materials for survival, cultivation, and healing. It had the same effect as his storage pouch, albeit through different means. On second thought, Lu Yi understood that there must be a storage space opened up with the void spirit grain as the core on Yanji's body. Just like him, the real good things were placed in there, and now they must have been lost with the death of Yanji. He was a little disappointed, but it didn't matter. He hadn't really counted on this anyway. The storage ring itself was not a very valuable item, and this thing looked ordinary, but Lu Yi was a Lu Yi. He didn't dare to casually take it out and use it. He couldn't guarantee that the experts who were related to the aphid would notice something. When that time came, it would cause some trouble for no reason. While recovering his spirit power, Lu Yi took out the 3 spirit beast bags. These were the 3 gains of the insectoids this time. As for what was inside, Lu Yi had some guesses, and it shouldn't be far off. The spirit beast bags also had restriction locks, but they weren't too complicated. He could easily break them. When the first spirit beast pouch was opened, a snow-white, flawless beast with a single horn on its head suddenly darted out of it. Its entire body was glowing with fluorescent light. It was a magnificent beast. As soon as the snow-white beast appeared, it grew in the wind and suddenly turned into the size of a water buffalo. Pure white light gathered and lingered on its single horn, but it emitted an extremely dangerous aura. Lu Yi only looked at it quietly. Lu Yingying flapped its wings and greeted it, shouting, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." When the snow-white beast saw a demon, it was obviously stunned for a moment, because it was a little different from what it had imagined. It thought that when it appeared again, it would be surrounded by insectoids, ready to fight to the death. The pure white light on its single horn slowly converged, and Lu Yingying went forward and whispered something to it. The snow-white beast looked at Lu Yi from time to time. In the blink of an eye, its eyes slowly became gentle and filled with gratitude. It stepped forward and nodded respectfully to Lu Yi twice, probably to express its gratitude. Lu Yi waved his hand in response. He didn't know what race this unicorn belonged to, but the insectoids had been plotting here for many years. It was nothing more than some rare races living in the tree world. This unicorn should have been captured in its own tree world and sent here. The aphid came here this time to take away the harvest of the insectoids' tree world for nearly 100 years. In the end, it happened to meet Lu Yi and ended up dead. Lu Yi opened the second spirit beast bag. With his previous experience, he was a little vigilant this time. But what he didn't expect was that after waiting for a long time, nothing came out of it. Could it have been suffocated to death? Lu Yi carefully reached out to grab it and quickly took out something from the spirit beast bag. It was a tree. When Lu Yi took it out, he clearly saw that on the trunk of the tree, one of its eyes quietly narrowed, carefully looking around. Lu Yingying came up to it again and began to tell it about the current situation. Lu Yi recognized that this tree was from the wood spirit race, which was the race that the Fey race had transformed into before. Gradually, the wood spirit relaxed its vigilance and also grew hands and feet. It said in human language, "Thank you for saving me, fellow Taoist. Mu Kuei of the wood spirit race is extremely grateful." Lu Yi still waved his hand. Saving the other party was just an unintentional gain, so there was no need to care too much. He opened the third spirit beast bag. At that time, the 2 spirit beast bags that the aphid had given him contained the snow-white beast and the wood spirit, but he was holding the third one in his hand. From the looks of it, the third spirit beast bag should contain the most important one, otherwise, the aphid would not have made such a choice. Lu Yi was very curious about which race this was to be valued so much by the aphid. The spirit beast bag opened and there was no movement for a long time. However, Lu Yi could feel that there was something small inside. After waiting for a moment, a small head poked out of the spirit beast bag and looked around timidly. Lu Yingying was extremely surprised. "Red Dandan?" The small head turned and saw Lu Yingying flying to the side. It immediately exclaimed, "Lu Yingying!" Hong Dandan was excited. It rushed out of the spirit beast bag and rushed to Lu Yingying's side. The two little fairies immediately hugged each other, crying and laughing. The third spirit beast pouch actually contained an evil spirit. Lu Yi was very surprised. If the fairy race had lost a clansman, why did Golden Flash not mention it? One had to know that the fairy race had a total of hundreds of clansmen. It was very obvious that any one of them had gone missing. It was fine that Golden Flash did not mention it. It probably did not expect that he would kill his way to the insect race's tree world, and did not expect him to save the kidnapped clansman. However, it was very strange that Lu Yingying did not mention it. She came here with him, so she should have known about it. However, when she saw Hong Dandan just now, she was obviously very surprised. The reunion of the two little fairies was very lively. After a while, the excitement calmed down. Lu Yingying asked, "Hong Dandan, why are you here?" Hong Dandan felt wronged. "You really forgot about me." Lu Yingying looked embarrassed. "We thought you were recruited by the tree god." "Yes." Hong Dandan cried loudly. "I did not. I was taken away by the insect race. They locked me up for a very long time." Lu Yi was speechless. There were a total of hundreds of clansmen. One of them had gone missing and the entire race did not notice. It was clear that the fairy race was very unreliable. Lu Yingying's voice sounded. "Don't cry. I want to cry too." Lu Yi had been very curious about the insect race before. How did they open up the passages to different tree worlds? Logically speaking, low-level insects without much intelligence should not be able to do so. Now, it seemed that the insects themselves did not have this ability, but they had a treasure with this ability. The high-level insect race of the Insect Emperor world had a group of insects bring this treasure to the tree world. With the treasure's power, they slowly opened up the passages to the other tree worlds and then started to invade and plunder. Whether it was the Snow White Beast, Mu Kuei, or Hong Dandan, they were all victims. It was not just the three of them. The insect race had been plotting here for tens of thousands of years. There must be more victims. Since it was the insect race's plot, what was there to be polite about? Lu Yi immediately took out the treasure. Without this thing, the insect race would never be able to invade the other tree worlds in the future. This was really solving the problem at the root. It was more effective than eliminating the hive here. When the Snow White Beast and Mu Kuei saw this, it was unknown whether they were sad or not, but they also cried together. The scene was very lively for a moment. Lu Yi felt a headache coming. He quickly walked to the core of the hive and slashed down. If he wanted to destroy the hive, he had to destroy the core of the hive. Only then would the hive lose the ability to hatch new members. In the fairy tree world, he and Yu Yaorao destroyed the hive. When they were at the core, a passage to the insect race's tree world appeared. He thought that the situation here would be similar, but when Lu Yi broke open the core of the hive, he found something inside. It was a snow-white thing that looked like a lotus root. It was placed in the center of the core, and it was filled with a strange power. Lu Yi was curious and carefully examined it. Soon he saw through the function of this thing. This thing was the root of the passage to the tree world. Of course, the hive still had to be eliminated. It could not be left to take root and sprout here. Playing with the lotus root-like treasure in his hand, Lu Yi clearly felt that this thing had some inexplicable connection with many tree worlds. He could use this thing to easily open up the passages to those tree worlds. Chapter 12:28. The Core of the Void Beast. Lu Yingying suddenly spoke. She had stopped crying. Hong Dandan, Mu Kuei, and the Snow White Beast were all standing quietly at the side. Lu Yi turned to look at her. "You know this thing?" Lu Yingying nodded. "There are beasts in the starry sky. One of them is called the Void Beast. It is born with a very strange spatial ability. It can travel through the void and go to any place in the starry sky. This is the core left behind after its death. The Zerg placed it here and used its power as the source to explore the nearby forest. Then, they opened the passage to those forest realms." "Yes." Hong Dandan also said, "But the number of void beasts is very small. There are even fewer of them than us fairies. And because they have spatial ability, they are very difficult to hunt. I don't know where the Zerg got this thing." Yes. Lu Yi sighed inwardly. The fairies were indeed knowledgeable. It would be better if they were more reliable. In that case, isn't this thing very valuable? Lu Yi realized a problem. Both fairies nodded. It's very valuable and rare. Yes. Lu Yi smiled. It's surnamed Lu. Although he did not know what to do with it, since it was valuable and rare, there was no reason to let it go. In any case, he had a good harvest this time. However, it could be seen that the Zerg Emperor world valued the forest realm. Otherwise, they would not have placed such a valuable thing in the nest here. The Zerg powerhouses behind the scenes probably did not know either. To think that there was actually someone in this world who could barge into this place alone and slaughter all the insectoid guards here without much effort. In fact, it was not that there were no monsters in history who broke into this place with righteous indignation, but those monsters who broke in here, without exception, all turned into nutrients for the nest. Playing with the core in his hand, Lu Yi suddenly turned to look at Mu Tong. The wood spirit tree realm has been invaded by the Zerg, right? Yes. Mu Tong's face immediately showed an angry expression. Yes, many of our clansmen died in battle because of this, and some were also captured. Yes. Then if I give you a chance to take revenge, are you willing to cherish it? Yes. He wanted to clear out the Zerg tree realm alone. Feng Qingli. Moreover, he still did not know how big the living clan structure was. The fairy tree world was not large, but the insectoid tree world was definitely not as small as the fairy tree world. Even if it was only 2 or 3 times larger than the fairy tree world, it would still be very troublesome. Therefore, Lu Yi wondered if he could borrow some strength. Since the core of the void beast could open up a connection with some of the tree realms, wouldn't it be better to open up a channel and lead those races who were willing to take revenge over? This shouldn't be difficult. During his investigation just now, he clearly felt that he could use the void beast's heart core to open those passages. This was because the positions of those tree realms were imprinted in the heart core. Although Mu Kuei's expression was wooden, he was also a smart person. When Lu Yi said this, he immediately understood what he meant and quickly said, "We must fight to the death with the insectoids." All the races living in the tree realms had lost their homes. It was not easy for them to settle down in the tree realms, but in the end, they had to suffer the invasion of the insectoids. They had long been unable to tolerate it. Unfortunately, the situation of each race was not good. They could barely protect themselves. How could they have the strength to fight back? If someone could provide them with such an opportunity, no race would be willing to refuse. Lu Yi turned to look at the snow-white exotic beast. It kept nodding, the meaning was obvious. Very good. Lu Yi was excited. This way, the biggest problem was solved. The rest would depend on how he would use his methods. However, although the core space of the insectoid nest was not small, it could not be used here. He waved his hand. Let's kill our way out first. Go! A group of several figures rushed towards the insectoid passage. Before leaving, Lu Yi activated his spiritual energy and set a fire in the core of the insectoid nest, burning the surrounding flesh wall clean. Along the way, they would occasionally encounter some lone insectoids. However, under Lu Ye's mountain blade, there was not much resistance. The 2 fairies sat on his shoulders, one on his left and one on his right, each urging Zhu Yan. One buffed the mountain blade, while the other buffed the body. Lu Yi felt that even if there was a constellation realm in front of him, he would be able to slash it. Soon, they rushed out of the insectoid passage and arrived in the wilderness. As far as the eye could see, there was desolation everywhere. Places where low-level insectoids wreaked havoc were basically signs of the end of the world. Only places where high-level insectoids lived would have the aura of civilization. Although he had a rough idea of how to clear out the insectoid tree realms, he still had to implement it. Lu Yi could not be sure if he would encounter any problems along the way. However, if he really could not implement it, he could only rely on his own strength and slowly do it. At most, it would take a lot of time. Holding the lotus-like core of the void beast, Lu Yi carefully sensed it. There were more than 10 imprints in the core, which should be the imprints of the tree realms. These imprints were the result of the insectoid's efforts over the past 10,000 years. It did not mean that there were only 10 or so tree realms on the reincarnation tree. There were countless tree realms on the reincarnation tree, and many races of the universe were settled in them. However, even if the insectoids had planned for so many years, it was impossible for them to open up the passageways to all the tree realms. More than 10 was already a lot. In theory, as long as he connected these imprints, he could use the power of the core itself to connect the passageways to the tree realms. The troublesome thing was that Lu Yi did not know which tree realm these imprints were connected to. In the end, he still had to try. First, he had to gather the wood spirits and the snow-white exotic beasts. Randomly choosing an imprint, Lu Yi channeled his power into it. The void in front of the lotus-like core immediately distorted, like a stone thrown into a calm water surface, rippling. Qi Zhuxin. In the blink of an eye, 2 spinning vortexes were formed. From the vortexes, there was a breath coming in, faintly showing some scenes of the tree realms. So simple? Lu Yi was a little stunned. However, Lu Yi quickly stopped channeling his spiritual power. This was because he could see that the tree world he had opened up this time was actually the path to the demonic enlightenment tree-raising contract. It was not difficult for him to get the demonic plating rules to participate in this matter. Things did not have to be thought about. Practice did not rely on beauty. Their beauty did not rely on luck. Also, it was not suitable for the demonic plating rules to continue to work together. There were some who scattered. He tried a second time and recorded that he had succeeded the first time. The second time, he was familiar with it. His luck was very good. This time, he made the contract. Surprisingly, it was the path to the wood spirit tree. Not long after, Elder Chuang and the others came over. Lu Yi took the lead. Mu Kuei plunged into the vortex. He disappeared. When Mu Kuei connected to Shi, Lu Shi found a problem. Since Mei Wan whipped him, things were a little numb. He had read about this before, but thinking about it carefully. Things like teleportation consumed energy. Jill wanted to shout at them, "Don't come over." But at this point, shouting was useless. They could not hear him before coming over from the opposite side. He could only quickly take out a large number of spirit pills and swallow them. The 2 demons looked on, dumbfounded. They did not know what was wrong with Lu Yi, for him to crazily take medicine. The wood spirits came from their own tree realm. They all rushed to Lu Shi. Shi too expressed his utmost respect to the inner secret realm. They said that there was someone who wanted to take revenge and help them open the passage, allowing them to take revenge. Opportunity. They thought that such a human powerhouse would be dignified and extraordinary. But when they came here, they found that he was taking medicine like a lunatic. Lu Shihua felt that his spiritual power consumption was not something that could be replenished by taking spirit pills. Until a certain moment, when his spiritual power was only left with 20%, he steeled his heart and prepared to break the passage to the tree realm. He had tried his best. But even if he consumed a lot of energy, the wood spirits from the opposite tree realm were only in the state. Whether it was through the Tianji pillar teleportation or the formation teleportation, it was the same. There was no reason not to need it here. If it was just to maintain the existence of the passage, it would not consume much of Lu Ye's spiritual power, because he was relying more on the power of the void beast core. But if there were living beings passing through the passage, the consumption would be huge. 1 or 2 was fine, but if there were more, he would definitely not be able to hold on. This was awkward. This level of spiritual power consumption could not be replenished by spirit pills and spirit stones. He had to think of a way. Just as Lu Yi was considering whether or not to use the Void Beast's core to set up a spirit array, a portion of his spirit chi was suddenly extracted. In the vortex passage, Mu Kuei's figure returned and said, "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you." The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. He felt another portion of his spiritual power being sucked away. Another wood spirit walked out of the vortex passage. The wood spirits were very efficient and fast. As they walked out of the vortex one after another, Lu Yi felt his spiritual energy reserves drop by less than 100 times at a frightening rate. "Let's fight one-on-one." He comforted himself. Strangely, even without his whirlpool, the dimensional wood spirits' bodies still didn't make sense at all. They walked out of luck. It was equivalent to going through a teleportation. It would consume energy. His spiritual power was like this. But now, he clearly did not have any more solid power. Where did it come from? Chapter 12:29. This was a very thought-provoking matter. Lu Yi silently observed for a moment and roughly had some guesses. The power consumed by the teleportation could not be generated for no reason. Since it was not supported by his spiritual power, then there must be a difference. The people in the industry were secretly offering help that could not be seen or touched. This was the tree world. Who else could provide such help? It must be the reincarnation tree without a doubt. When he got the situation in the tree world, Striking Yi still felt that the reincarnation tree was too rigid. The tree world was for those who had lost their homes to provide a place to live. It should be peaceful and quiet, but the Zerg brought war. Here, Lu Yi did not know what the situation was like in the other invading tree worlds. He had never been there, but he could only look at the fairy tree world. If the fairies did not have special abilities, there was no way to establish a foothold in the tree world if they could completely hide within a radius of hundreds of miles. They would have long been plundered by the Zerg. However, Jade Demon Burn said that this was the foundation of the reincarnation tree. It did not reject any race that came to rely on it, nor did it interfere in the disputes between these races. All it could do was provide a tree world for each race. It was an absolutely neutral existence. But now it seemed that no matter how neutral it was, it had its own likes and dislikes. The reincarnation tree probably could not stand what the Zerg had done. It was just that due to some rules, it could not personally expel them. However, at certain critical moments, it did not mind providing some indirect help. Just like now. Li thought so. As for whether it was true or not, he would know after trying. He once again urged his spiritual power to pour into the heart core in his hand, connecting it to another imprint, and quickly opened a passage to another tree world. He also looked a little faster. Open 0. If someone wants to go and persuade the other race to move with us, who would be willing to go? I'll go. Under Lu Yingying's surprised annotation, Hong Dandan bravely stood up, flapped her little wings, and drilled into the passage. When she drilled into the passage, Lu Yi decisively stopped the transmission of his spiritual power, but the passage was still maintained, and Hong Dandan's figure disappeared. That's right, there was indeed an invisible force supporting the transmission between the passages, and it could only be the reincarnation tree. Things had become much simpler now. Lu Yi no longer hesitated, urging the power of his core to open all the passages leading to the smoke tree world. This time, he didn't need to say anything. Green and Snowbai Ipu's father found a passage and went in. Mu Kuei also led some of his clansmen into other passages. The passageway. Lu Yi waited while recovering his spirit energy. In just a moment, from the dozen or so passages, strange figures stepped out one after another. Lu Yingying had returned after completing her task and was now sitting on Lu Ye's shoulder, introducing these races to him in a low voice. They were all races that Lu Yi had never heard of. There was also the Water Spirit Clan, which was also one of the 5 Element Spirit Clan. They all looked hazy, and their bodies were full of water vapor, which made people unable to see their faces clearly. There were elves with sharp ears, handsome males, and beautiful females. All of them had noble temperaments. There were also those who looked no different from humans but had a pair of snow-white wings on their backs. There was also the Stone Clan that seemed to have turned into spirits. There were also members of the Yen Clan whose eyes were like blazing flames. There were all kinds of strange races in the starry sky, which was an eye-opener for Lu Yi. The dozen or so tree worlds had brought more than a dozen races. There was no trace of humans. According to Yu Yao Rao, there were also humans living in the tree world on the reincarnation tree. However, the insectoids were after these rare races in the first place, so they were naturally not interested in humans. Even if they accidentally opened up a passage to the human tree world, they would probably think of a way to annihilate them. After all, it was meaningless for the insectoids to spend time and effort to capture a few humans. There were many races and clans rushing over from their respective tree realms, and some of them were small in number. There were only a few of them, There were only a few hundred people, and some had thousands. This was obviously not all the strength of each tree world, because those who could come here through the tree world passage were all individuals with considerable strength from their respective tree world. Those who were not strong enough would not be able to play much of a role even if they came here. Lu Yi was a human, and among so many rare races, he was like a crane in a flock of chickens. However, every race that came through the tree world passage would come to express their gratitude to him, because they were all suffering from the insect race's invasion, but had no way to solve it. Until today, it was Lu Yi, a human, who provided them with such an opportunity. The dozen or so clans gathered an army of nearly 10,000, among which there were many Divine Sea Realm and True Lake Realm cultivators. This force was enough to flatten this insect race tree world. There were not many rules, and no one listened to anyone's orders. When the elites of the various races had all passed through the tree world passage, they found their own directions and dispersed. In the following days, they would fight in all directions in this tree world, killing all the insect race they encountered. However, before they left, Lu Yi had an agreement with them. After dealing with the insect race in the tree world, he would return here and open the passage again, sending them back to their respective tree worlds. Although the reincarnation tree had secretly helped, it could not stand in front of the stage, so the matter of opening the tree world passage was still handled by Lu Yi. Only Lu Yi himself knew the mysteries of the whole matter. Even the two fairies who had been by his side all this time were unaware of it. They probably would not have thought that the reincarnation tree, which had always prided itself on fairness and justice, would one day have its butt crooked. There was no such thing as absolute fairness and justice in this world. Take Little Nine for example. Ever since he became familiar with Lu Yi, as long as Lu Ye's request was not too excessive, he would be able to satisfy it. The insect race tree world began to suffer. In 10,000 years, it had always been their tree world that was slowly being invaded. This was the first time it had been invaded, and it was not just one race, but an alliance of more than a dozen races. Large numbers of insect race were killed every day. If the hive was still there, the number of insect race could be replenished, but the hive had been destroyed by Lu Yi long ago. Every insect race member that died was one less insect race member. The teams of more than a dozen races spread out in more than a dozen directions, like a dozen large nets, crisscrossing back and forth in the pond that was the insect race tree world. Although the insect race tree world was not small, it could not withstand such torment. Not to mention, Lu Yi was not idle. He was also sweeping around, looking for insect race members to kill. In about 10 days, all of the insects were killed. The entire insectoid tree world was barren, and there were no traces of insects left. The alliance teams that had been fighting all over the place returned one after another. Through Lu Yi, they opened up the tree world passage that belonged to them and embarked on their return journey. Before the leaders of each race parted, they all expressed their most sincere gratitude to Lu Yi, because they knew that after this plague, the 10,000 years of suffering had come to an end. In the future, they would no longer have to worry about the abominable insect race invading their home. Such kindness was naturally worth thanking. There were even more hospitable races that invited Lu Yi to their tree world as a guest, but Lu Yi rejected them all. This time, he had come to the reincarnation tree with Yang Qing because he had something important to do. He did not know what it was exactly, but what he was doing now was just an extension of the initial test. He had already spent a lot of time, so it was not good to delay any longer. Since they were thanking him, of course, it was not just empty words. Lu Yi received many local specialties from the various races, which was an unexpected gain. After busily sending off the last tribe, the tree world passage in front of him slowly disappeared. There were only 3 figures left in the entire insect race tree world: Lu Yi and the 2 fairies. The 2 fairies were chattering on the side, and it was unknown what they were talking about. They looked very happy, and there was no way they could not be happy. The 2 of them had done such a big thing with Lu Yi this time. When they returned to the fairy tree world, they would definitely be worshipped by their people. They could almost see the admiration in their people's eyes, which made them look forward to it. The other races. The group had left, and only the two of them were left. Naturally, they had to return to the fairy tree world as well. Hong Dandan suddenly looked up. Lu Ye, what are you looking at? On the other side, Lu Yi was looking at them. His hands were clasped together, revealing a gap. He was sneakily looking at something, which made the fairies very curious. The fairies were full of curiosity. This was their nature. This was also the reason why their race was so few in number. Whenever they found something strange, they would always want to understand it, and then they would often walk on the road to death. Lu Yi quickly turned his back to them and shook his head. Nothing, nothing. If he did not say that, it might really be nothing. But when he said that, the two fairies' curiosity was ignited. They flapped their wings and flew over, wanting to see what was going on. Lu Yi, however, turned his back to them, still maintaining his posture of looking at something. The two fairies were unwilling to give up. They turned their direction, insisting on seeing what was going on. Lu Yi turned again. He pulled back and forth a few times. Hong Dandan said angrily, "Stingy, what's wrong with looking?" Lu Yingying also chimed in, "That's right, Lu Yi is stingy." Lu Yi scolded them with a straight face. "Children, don't be so curious." Then the two little fairies flew forward together, one on the left and the other on the right, and rocked him back and forth. Look, just a little. Don't worry, we won't tell anyone." Lu Yi looked troubled. "Do you have to look?" The two fairies were on the same side. Lu Yi sighed. "It's troublesome." Look. As he said that, he put his clasped hands in front of the two fairies, revealing a gap. The two fairies nervously held their breaths, mimicking him just now, narrowing one eye to look at the shoe clearly. However, what awaited them was an open bag. Lu Yi kept the spiritual beast collar and closed the bag. His face was not red, his heart was not beating fast, and his expression was normal. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.